Hi guys. Tonight we begin with you standing at the edge of a desert evening that feels strangely alive, as if the air itself is stretching after a long day in the sun. You breathe in and it is still hot, the kind of heat that clings to your throat and settles behind your eyes. The sky is turning a smoky orange, softening toward indigo, yet the ground beneath your feet radiates warmth like an oven door left open. You glance around and you have that moment of disbelief, because you know you are about to imagine sleeping here without air conditioning, and you think to yourself that you probably will not survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And go ahead and tell me your location and local time in the comments so I know where you are drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. You trudge forward into the glow of ancient Egypt, and the heat settles around you like a heavy, invisible shawl. Even now, after the sun has dipped below the horizon, the sand still hums with stored energy. You can almost feel the day it endured, a day when the blazing sun beat down relentlessly, turning mud brick walls into slow cookers and courtyards into simmering bowls of air. Yet the Egyptians around you move with a calm acceptance, as if they have mastered some slow dance with the desert that you have never learned. A faint breeze slips past your cheek, more a hint than actual relief. You follow it instinctively. In the distance, you see the silhouettes of houses made from sun-dried mud brick, their surfaces glowing softly in the evening light. These walls are thick, intentionally so, because one mainstream historical fact is that mud brick construction was essential for trapping coolness inside during the day and releasing it slowly at night. The Egyptians knew their materials intimately, mastering the rhythm of heat and shade as if it were a kind of domestic magic. You step closer, and the scent of earth, baked and rebaked by centuries of sun, fills your nose. Voices drift from an open doorway, low and tired, softened by the rhythms of night. Heat presses in, but the mood around you seems to loosen with each passing minute. People do not rush. They simply move, letting the dark settle around them like a blanket. You take that in for a moment, wondering how they endured such constant heat without the quick luxury of a mechanical breeze. Someone walks past, balancing a pottery jar on their hip. The clay looks almost alive, still glowing faintly from the day's sun, but you know that as the night deepens, that same jar will become a secret ally in cooling. A quirky little tidbit many people forget is that Egyptians placed porous water jars near windows, so the desert breeze could pull moisture through the walls of the container and create tiny pockets of evaporative cool air. It is not ice cold by any means, but in a place like this, a few degrees of difference can feel like a small miracle. As you continue your slow walk, your sandals scuff the packed earth, and you let your eyes adjust to the deepening color of the sky. Stars prick through one by one, steady and unblinking. The air feels thicker now but less aggressive. The donkey brays somewhere down the lane, the sound drifting lazily, almost as if the animal is half asleep already. You pause beside a wall, placing your hand on the surface. It is warm, but no longer scorching. The heat is easing out of it like breath. You can almost imagine how the ancient families leaned against these same walls on nights like this, coaxing whatever coolness they could from the materials they shaped with their own hands. Historians still argue whether nightly rooftop sleeping was the universal practice or more common in certain regions, but the enduring architectural clues suggest that Egyptians built with night comfort constantly in mind. You take a few more steps and find yourself between two houses where a thin alley opens into a courtyard. The change is immediate. The air feels slightly cooler, as if someone has turned down the temperature just enough to make your shoulders relax. You hover there, marveling at the strategic way courtyards were placed to capture even the faintest wind. It is easy to miss the brilliance of such simplicity when you come from a world of switches and thermostats. The muted chatter of families preparing for evening routines drifts from all directions. You hear soft splashing as someone rinses pottery, the gentle clack of wooden utensils, a lullaby being hummed with a rhythm that matches the slow pulse of the night. Everything feels grounded in routine, shaped by the heat, yet not defeated by it. You step into the courtyard and tilt your head back. Above you, the deep purple sky feels endless. The first wave of nighttime insects begins its chorus, a persistent buzz, but steadier than annoying, like nature trying to soothe your mind into drifting. You breathe in again and catch the faint scent of burning incense, something floral and slightly sweet. Maybe it is lotus resin. Maybe it is crushed herbs laid on a small clay burner. Either way, it softens the air, turning exhaustion into something that feels survivable. From here you can see the flat rooftops rising around the courtyard, some with ladders leaned against them. A child climbs one, followed by an older sibling who moves with practiced ease. Rooftop living is not an escape but a nightly migration. You watch them disappear over the edge, their shadows elongating as lantern light flickers below. The people around you prepare themselves with a kind of gentle resignation. They accept that comfort is relative, flexible, shaped by habit. That realization settles into your thoughts like a lesson you wish you had known earlier. Maybe comfort is not something you command with machines or gadgets. Maybe it is what you negotiate slowly with your environment. A gust of wind shivers through the courtyard and moves across your face. It is still warm, but now it carries a softness you had not felt earlier. It whispers of night approaching, the desert shifting, cooling, exhaling. For the first time since stepping into this world, you feel yourself release tension you did not realize you were holding. You stay there, in the center of the courtyard, letting the darkness grow thicker around you. The transition from burning day to tolerable night is not dramatic. It is subtle, patient, like a conversation between the earth and the air. You look around and see that everyone seems to understand this language except you. Already, your mind begins to drift to the next part of the evening, the rooftop world, where whole families gather to sleep under the stars. But that journey comes later. For now you are simply learning how the night begins in ancient Egypt, how it loosens the desert's grip, one breath at a time. You linger, absorbing the atmosphere, letting it sink in as the last traces of daylight slip away. The world is dim, warm, and humming, and you start to feel strangely ready to follow these people into their nightly rituals, ready to find out how they transformed a brutally hot landscape into a place of rest. You step away from the courtyard and drift toward the heart of the village, where the mud brick houses rise like squat, patient guardians of the night. Each one looks deceptively simple, but as you walk closer, you start to feel the intelligence behind every curve and corner. There is a faint, chalky scent as you pass your fingers over a wall, the surface still warm from the long day, but beginning to release its grip on the heat. You follow a narrow path between two homes, noticing how the air seems to calm itself here, gathering in quiet pockets that feel cooler than the open street you just crossed. You reach the front of a house and pause, studying the thick mud brick walls. They look ordinary, almost humble, yet one mainstream historical fact stands tall in your mind. These walls, crafted from a mixture of mud, straw, and water, were shaped by hand and dried under the same sun that tormented the people who built them. Their thickness was intentional, functioning like a battery that stored coolness through the morning and held onto it long after the sun began to bite. Egyptians understood thermal mass long before anyone started calling it that, though you know better than to use such terminology here. You simply feel the effectiveness as your fingers rest against the solid surface. You step inside the doorway, ducking slightly. The interior greets you with a hush. The shift from outside to inside is noticeable, a small but welcome relief. The floor under your sandals feels smoother and cooler, as if the sun has not fully claimed this territory. In the dim interior, you hear soft murmuring, the familiar rhythms of family life unwinding. Someone prepares a small meal of bread and onions. Someone else folds linen cloths with slow, practiced motions. As you stand there, taking it in, you notice how little decoration fills the room. A few reed baskets, a low wooden stool, pottery jars set neatly against the wall. Everything is functional, chosen with care. Even the placement of windows feels intentional. Small, high openings let in just enough night air to refresh the space without allowing the raging heat of midday to invade. Historians still argue whether these window placements varied widely between regions or followed strict architectural norms, but the pattern you see here seems almost universal in its logic. Your eyes adjust, and you step further inside, noticing a raised platform along one wall. It looks like a sleeping ledge, smooth and flat, and you imagine how cool it must feel in the darkest hours of the night. A quirky tidbit whispers into your mind. In some households, people smeared a thin layer of damp clay or even lightly sprinkled water over these surfaces before lying down, creating a short-lived but precious cooling effect as evaporation worked its slow magic. Simple, subtle, and surprisingly effective in a world without machines. You kneel and run your hand along the platform. It is firm, a little gritty, carrying the faint scent of dust and damp earth. Above you, the ceiling is constructed from wooden beams layered with palm fronds and mud plaster. You notice small cracks where faint glimpses of starlight peek through. Nothing dramatic, just thin, accidental constellations scattered across the ceiling. They remind you of the grander horizon waiting above the rooftops. A quiet shuffle catches your attention. An older woman moves toward the doorway, carrying a small clay jar. She passes you without surprise, as if she has long grown accustomed to odd moments and unexpected guests drifting through warm nights. She sets the jar near a window, tilting it just so. You watch the water inside glisten. The clay walls of the vessel feel slightly damp to the touch, and you understand that this jar is not simply decoration, it is one of the home's cooling companions. Outside the doorway, the sky deepens into a blue so rich it looks almost liquid. The faint coolness outdoors calls to you, inviting you back into the twilight. You follow the woman out as she hums under her breath, a tune with no urgency. Evening is not a race in this world. It is a slow unfurling. You step back into the lane and feel how the night has shifted. The heat has softened, the air thick yet less punishing. The mud brick houses are glowing softly under the faint starlight, their rounded edges catching the moon's gentle shimmer. Their arrangement feels organic, as if the village grew naturally like a cluster of clay mushrooms rising from the sand. You take a moment to imagine how different your own nights would be if you lived here. No fans humming in the background, no cold air blasting from vents, just you, the stars, and a steady trust in mud brick and breeze. A group of children runs past you, their laughter echoing through the lanes. They dart between houses, weaving in and out of doorways, finally disappearing into a courtyard where a low lantern glows. Their joy feels unburdened by the heat. They accept the world exactly as it is. You move along the path and notice how some houses have small alcoves built directly into their outer walls. Inside these you see shallow bowls, most of them empty at the moment. During the day, these alcoves might hold offerings to household gods, or simply hold tools protected from the harshest sun. But at night, they serve as another cooling trick. Some families fill them with water to encourage evaporative cooling right at the entrance of their home. You imagine arriving here after a long, blazing day and feeling even the smallest breath of cooled air against your face as you lean near the doorway. You continue walking, tracing your fingers along the walls as you go. The night breeze gathers strength, flowing through the alleys with purpose. You can almost feel it being guided, shaped by the village layout itself. Egyptians arranged their homes in ways that encouraged natural ventilation, letting wind slip between buildings like a silent guest. The thought makes you smile. The whole village seems to be in on the same secret. In the distance, you hear the sound of a pot lid being gently placed onto a cooking jar. You hear a faint lullaby drifting from behind a half-open door. You hear the steady scratch of a reed broom sweeping the ground. Everything here feels unrushed. The heat demands patience, and patience becomes a habit passed down through generations. You pause at the intersection of two lanes and take in the view. Rows of mud brick walls rise around you, forming a canyon of shadow. The moonlight hits one of the homes just right, revealing small decorative impressions pressed into the plaster, perhaps made with the edge of a shell or a carved wooden stamp. These small touches remind you that even in a world where comfort was hard-earned, beauty still mattered. And as you stand there, letting the heaviness of the night wrap around your shoulders, you feel the mud brick village revealing its purpose. It is not merely shelter, it is a cooling machine built from earth itself, shaped by people who understood the desert in a way you never have. The houses breathe with the night. They absorb the day. They create shade, capture breezes, and hold memories in every grain of dried mud. You breathe in one last time, letting the warm but steady air fill your lungs. Ahead of you waits the next space, the next trick that Egyptians used to coax comfort from the desert. You feel yourself drawn toward it with quiet curiosity as you step forward into the deeper folds of the village, ready to discover how these people shaped their homes into oases of nighttime relief. You follow the narrow lane until it bends open into a wider space, and suddenly you are standing inside a courtyard touched by soft shadows. The moment you step in, the air shifts. It feels looser here, more relaxed, almost as if the courtyard itself exhales around you. You feel the breeze, faint but real, threading through the open rectangular space. It brushes your cheek like a gentle hand. Not cool exactly, but cool enough to make you pause. Palms rise above the courtyard walls, their fronds trembling with each small gust. These tall, slow-moving giants cast wavering shadows that move like living lace along the packed earth. You walk forward, letting your fingers skim along a low mud brick ledge. The surface is warmer near the top, but pleasantly cool near the base, shaded all day by the angle of the courtyard walls. You already feel more at ease here. A woman sits on the ground nearby, grinding herbs with a stone pestle. The rhythmic scrape against the bowl makes a soft, steady sound that mixes with the sigh of palm leaves. She glances up at you with a tired but peaceful expression, nods once, and returns to her work. Her presence makes the courtyard feel lived in, not just architectural but intimate, a place where heat becomes manageable through simple design. You tilt your head up and watch the sky framed by the walls. It looks like a deep blue well, catching the first stars. Courtyards like this were common throughout ancient Egypt, and one mainstream historical fact stands out. These open-air spaces were deliberately built into homes to invite breezes downward, to ventilate rooms from above, and to offer families a cooler refuge during the stifling evenings. The Egyptians understood that a roof might trap heat, but an open courtyard released it, like a chimney pointing at the stars. You step deeper into the space and feel how the ground under your feet retains a hint of coolness, as if the shade has been guarding it all day. A small pool sits in one corner, little more than a shallow basin of water fed from a nearby jar. It catches the faint moonlight and throws trembling reflections onto the wall. You crouch beside it and run your fingertips through the surface. The water is lukewarm, but the movement helps the surrounding air feel subtly refreshed. It is a gentle trick, but one the Egyptians used everywhere they could. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Some families sprinkled their courtyards with a thin layer of water in the evenings, letting it evaporate and drop the temperature by just enough to give everyone a sigh of relief. You can almost picture someone walking around with a jar right now, spreading water across the ground like a blessing. It is not dramatic, it is not cold, but in this climate, even 3 degrees of difference feels like a small miracle. You stand again and wander toward a tall palm at the edge of the courtyard. The trunk is rough beneath your hand, the bark warm but no longer scorching. The fronds above sway and rustle with a sleepy rhythm, creating a natural canopy that filters the last drips of daylight. You can smell the faint sweetness of date fruit still clinging to some of the branches. The scent mixes with the dusty earth, forming a fragrance that feels ancient, grounded, familiar, even if you have never been here before. A child scampers past you, barefoot, carrying a reed basket. She stops near the wall and places the basket on a small shelf set into the plaster. Inside are bits of pottery, a piece of folded linen, and a few dried herbs tied together. She spreads them out like she is arranging treasure, humming quietly. Her calm reminds you that the courtyard is a living room without a roof, a breathing space that families use as naturally as you might use your living room couch. You take a slow step back toward the center. The courtyard works on you in subtle ways, slowing your breath, loosening the tightness in your shoulders. You realize that it is not only architecture that cools the body, but also the way a place shapes your state of mind. Shade softens your thoughts. Wind carries away your urgency. Sounds settle you into the rhythm of the night. A potter emerges from a side room with a newly shaped vessel. He sets it down near the wall where the breeze flows strongest. He studies its surface, checking for cracks, then wipes his brow. His forearm glistens in the dim light. Without speaking, he sits down near the small pool and dips his feet in the water. The splash is soft, but the relief he lets out is unmistakable. There is something almost ceremonial about how each member of the household uses this space. The courtyard is not ornate, yet every detail feels purposeful. You glance at a small notch carved into one wall, just beneath a reed mat pinned above it. It looks like a ledge meant to hold a lantern during late evenings. You imagine the gentle glow bouncing off the clay walls, filling the courtyard with honey-colored light, making the night feel softer. You drift toward a doorway that leads deeper into the house. A warm glow spills out, but the air inside looks motionless compared to the soft current out here. You understand why families gravitate to these open spaces as the day ends. Indoors offers darkness, but not much breeze. Out here, the desert night finally begins to dance. Historians still debate whether courtyards developed purely from environmental necessity or also from social preference. Some scholars argue that the design originated as a response to heat, while others believe it was just as deeply tied to the communal nature of Egyptian life. You sense that both explanations hold truth. The heat shaped the architecture, but the architecture shaped how people interacted with one another. You decide to stay in the courtyard a little longer. The air is shifting again, cooler now in noticeable waves. A faint, dusty smell lifts from the ground with each breeze. Somewhere beyond the walls you hear the muffled laughter of neighbors sharing food and conversation. The sounds drift in gently, as if the whole settlement is connected by the same late evening breath. A woman begins laying out bedding along one wall, preparing for those who will sleep here instead of climbing to the roof. Not everyone chooses the open sky. Some prefer the privacy, others the shade. You watch her spread linen sheets across woven mats, smoothing out wrinkles with her palms. She pauses to tie a small pouch of herbs above the sleeping area, the kind meant to keep biting insects at a distance. The scent reaches you, a mix of mint and desert flowers. You imagine yourself here, lying on one of those mats, feeling the light breeze run across your skin, hearing the rustle of palms overhead. It is almost easy to drift into the fantasy until a sudden gust shakes a spray of dried leaves loose. They flutter down around you like fragments of old paper, whispered messages from the day. The sky above the courtyard grows darker, the stars brighter. The air moves in slow pulses now, washing gently over you every few seconds. You can feel the desert night settling into its deeper rhythm, softer but still warm. A family gathers near the pool, their voices low and unhurried. They lean back, faces turned upward, as if thanking the sky for finally letting the heat loosen its grip. You step toward the exit, feeling the slight drop in temperature as you pass beneath the archway. The courtyard fades behind you like a room of calm energy, still echoing with shadows and whispers. Ahead of you lies the pull of the rooftops, the next stage of the night. You feel ready for it now. The courtyard has prepared you, cooled your thoughts, taught you how to breathe in this desert world. And so you continue, slipping into the narrow lane once more, guided by moonlight and the soft promise of wind drifting from above. You follow the curve of a narrow passageway until it opens into a quieter corner of the village. The scents of clay and evening bread fade behind you, replaced by the faint sweetness of night-blooming flowers perched in jars along the walls. You glance upward and see a simple wooden ladder leaning against the edge of a low roof. It looks like an invitation rather than an obstacle, and you feel yourself drawn to climb, as if the night itself is whispering that this is where the real relief begins. You step onto the first rung. The wood feels worn beneath your hands, its surface polished smooth by years of palms and bare feet. As you climb, you feel the warm air swirling around you, yet something shifts the moment your head rises above the roofline. A whisper of breeze greets you, slipping across your skin like a cool ribbon. It is not cold, but in this climate even the suggestion of movement feels luxurious. You hoist yourself onto the flat rooftop and pause, letting the world expand around you. The desert night stretches in all directions, the horizon glowing faintly under a wash of starlight. You exhale slowly. Up here the air feels lighter, freer, almost curious. The roofs are not just flat surfaces but living spaces, extensions of the home that awaken after sunset. You walk forward, your sandals tapping softly against the hard packed surface. The roof is cool at the edges but still warm near the center, absorbing and releasing the sun's stored energy. Families have already begun claiming their spots for the night. You see blankets laid out neatly, pillows arranged in a tidy row, and woven mats ready to receive tired bodies. A few children chase each other in slow, lazy circles, their laughter drifting like dust on the breeze. This rooftop world feels completely different from the rooms below. One widely accepted insight among Egyptologists is that people used these spaces not just for sleeping, but for cooking, drying laundry, telling stories, and marking seasonal events. Up here, life slipped into a more relaxed rhythm, shaped entirely by the wind and stars. It reminds you of modern balconies and terraces, except woven deeper into the fabric of daily existence. You walk toward the edge and look down into the lane you just left. From above, the village looks like a patchwork of small enclosures and shadowy corners. It feels peaceful, like a giant clay beehive settling after a long day of work. Someone across the way calls softly to a child, urging them to finish one last chore before resting. The voice is gentle, touched by fatigue, but also by tenderness. As you turn back toward the center of the roof, something catches your eye. A young man crouches near a small terracotta bowl filled with water. He dips a linen cloth into the bowl and wrings it out carefully before spreading it over his sleeping mat. A lesser-known detail recorded in old travel accounts hints that people sometimes dampened linens just enough to create a momentary cooling sensation when lying down. It was short-lived, but still precious in a world where heat controlled the rhythm of every movement. You watch as he smooths out the cloth, then sits beside it to massage his feet. The gesture is slow, relaxing, an act of transition from the demands of the day to the calm of the night. Nearby, his sister arranges a tiny clay lamp and adjusts the wick until a soft, steady glow spreads across the rooftop. The light makes everything look warm and intimate, like the rooftop is a giant open bedroom. You wander past them toward another section where a family is preparing their space. Two older women sit on folded blankets, gossiping in hushed tones that mix with the rustle of palm fronds. One of them glances at the sky and mutters a comment about the direction of the breeze. You can tell she has done this every night for decades, reading the wind like a familiar story. Some distance away, a group of men sits in a loose circle, sipping a drink that looks like a mild beer. Their low voices blend with the desert hum. One man gestures toward the horizon, pointing out something barely visible. You cannot hear his exact words, but you sense he is telling an old tale about the desert winds, perhaps explaining why tonight's breeze feels gentler than usual. Modern researchers continue to debate how much ancient Egyptians relied on local wind patterns to plan their nightly routines, but here on the rooftop, it feels obvious that they knew the wind intimately. A soft thump behind you draws your attention. A teenage boy lays down a reed mat with a practiced flick of his wrist. He dusts it off, inspects a corner, and sets a clay jar beside it. When he removes the stopper, you catch the faint scent of mint. A small curiosity, noted in household inventories, suggests that some families kept simple herb-infused water jars nearby, believing the aroma encouraged relaxation or cooled the senses. You inhale deeply, and the smell does feel calming, like a small gift from the night. You walk farther across the roof, letting the breeze play lightly with the loose strands of your hair. The stars seem brighter now, their glow undisturbed by smoke or modern lights. The sky looks so clear that you could reach up and touch the constellations with your fingertips. You imagine lying down on a mat here, staring upward until your eyes blur with sleep. Rooftop nights must have blurred the line between dreams and the real world. You approach an area where several mats are already occupied. An elderly couple lies side by side, their hands intertwined as they whisper to each other. Nearby, a girl carefully folds a piece of linen and places it under her head as a makeshift pillow. An infant sleeps beside her, wrapped in soft cloth, gently rising and falling with every breath. The sight makes you smile. Families here sleep together, not just out of necessity, but out of habit, tradition, and comfort. A faint hum of insects floats around you, but up here the breeze keeps them from settling too long. You notice a small woven cover hung from a wooden frame over one child's sleeping area. The covering looks like a mesh or net, designed to keep the persistent mosquitoes at bay. It is simple but effective, showing you how practical these rooftop spaces became in the warm months. You move toward another edge of the roof and observe how the rooftops create a whole second layer of village life. You see neighboring roofs, each with its own collection of mats, pots, baskets, lanterns, and people. It feels like an entire floating neighborhood above the earth, everyone connected by the same breeze, the same sky, the same shared struggle against the desert heat. You can hear quiet conversations drifting from every direction, overlapping like a patchwork quilt of sound. One corner catches your eye. A tall clay storage jar sits in the shade of a small mud brick parapet. You approach it, noticing how cool its surface feels. The jar is partly buried in the roof, a technique some families use to keep stored goods cooler than the air above. Archaeological surveys often note these half-sunken vessels, hinting at the ingenuity of people who learned to merge their homes with the rhythms of the desert itself. You look out again at the horizon, your body relaxing into the rooftop stillness. The wind brushes your shoulders, carrying hints of distant sand and dried herbs. Someone begins humming an old melody nearby, a tune so gentle it feels like a lullaby drifting across the rooftops. The night is settling deeper now, the heat loosening its grip bit by bit. As you breathe in, you realize that this rooftop is more than a simple sleeping platform. It is a sanctuary, a bridge between earth and sky, a cooling refuge shaped by necessity and perfected by time. Families climbed here not only to escape the heat, but to reconnect with each other and with the quiet peace of the desert night. You feel yourself drawn to remain here, to stretch out on a mat and let the stars move slowly overhead. But the night still has more to show you, and the rooftops are only one part of the ancient Egyptian arsenal against the relentless heat. You take one last look around, letting the rooftop world settle into your senses. The breeze washes over you again, warm yet comforting, guiding you toward the next gentle discovery waiting in the shadows below. You descend from the rooftop with slow, careful steps, letting the ladder carry you back into the softer darkness of the street. The night air feels different now that your skin has tasted the faint breeze above. Down here, the warmth settles around you again, but not as sharply as before. You walk through the narrow passage until you reach a doorway covered with a hanging linen curtain. It flutters gently each time a stray gust pushes through, inviting you inside with a whisper of fabric. You slip through the entrance and find yourself in a dim room lit only by a small oil lamp. The flame dances inside its clay bowl, making the linen textiles around the room glow like pale ghosts. You step farther in and see a woman seated on a low stool, her hands moving rhythmically over a bolt of linen cloth. She pulls the fabric between her fingers with a tenderness that catches your attention, smoothing it as if it was something alive. You pause, drawn toward the texture itself. Linen was not merely clothing for the Egyptians. It was comfort, protection, and a quiet ally during the suffocating heat. One well-known detail from museum collections shows that Egyptian linen, especially the finer grades, was woven to be lightweight and airy, ideal for surviving long nights when the desert refused to release the day's stored fire. You reach out and brush the cloth lightly. It feels almost weightless, a soft whisper against your fingertips. The woman glances up and gives you a small smile, then holds out a square of fabric as if offering you a sample. You lift it closer to the lamplight. It seems almost translucent, shimmering faintly as the flame flickers. The moment it touches your skin, you understand why ancient people treasured this material. It breathes, it cools, it floats. In a place where heat clings like a jealous spirit, linen becomes a silent blessing. Nearby, a young girl is folding smaller strips of cloth, humming softly as she stacks them in a woven basket. You watch her fingers work the edges with careful precision. A lesser-noticed detail preserved in old tomb paintings hints that families stored their linen close at hand, so they could quickly replace dampened or dusty cloths during the night. You can imagine someone rising in the early hours, quietly reaching for a fresh piece to pat their forehead or wrap around their neck. You move toward a low bench covered in rolled linen garments. Some are simple tunics, pale as moonlight. Others are more intricate, decorated with dyed edges or delicate stitching. Each garment tells a different story about the person who would wear it. One tunic has tiny beads sewn into the sleeves. Another has a faint scent of lotus oil embedded in its threads. You lift it closer and inhale. The fragrance is soft, calming, something that would make drifting to sleep easier after a long day under a merciless sun. The room feels warm, but the presence of linen softens the sensation. Every breeze that slips through the window seems to wrap itself in the fabric, carrying a hint of coolness with it. The walls absorb the glow of the lamp, casting gentle shadows that sway like the linen strips hanging from wooden rods. You feel yourself settling into the quiet rhythm of the space. A man enters carrying a small clay jar, which he sets on the floor beside the woman. He uncorks it, revealing a thin liquid. She dips her fingers into the jar and massages a few drops into a length of cloth. The scent that rises is familiar but subtle, some kind of fragrant oil. Present-day historians often mention that Egyptians applied oils not only to their skin but also to fabric, believing it refreshed the senses and provided an added layer of comfort during stifling nights. Whether the effect was physical or psychological hardly matters. Here in this room, the intention is unmistakable. The man unrolls a thick linen blanket with a practiced sweep. It is rougher than the garment cloth, meant for durability rather than elegance. He spreads it across the sleeping platform, smoothing out the wrinkles with slow, tired motions. You watch him tuck in the edges, as if preparing a bed for a long, gentle sleep. The woman hands him a second piece, lighter and thinner, perfect for placing over one's body on nights when the heat settles stubbornly, but the breeze offers at least some relief. You notice a tiny basket filled with smooth river stones placed in the corner. The stones are wrapped in scraps of linen. You pick one up, curious. The fabric is slightly damp, the stone cool to the touch. Some modern researchers suggest that people may have lightly moistened small objects like these to create resting points of subtle coolness on their bedding. Even if the effect lasted minutes rather than hours, those minutes must have felt like brief miracles. You step aside as a child enters the room carrying an armful of freshly washed linens. The cloth drapes over his shoulders like a waterfall. He places the pile on the bench, then carefully separates the pieces, shaking each one lightly before folding it. The sound is gentle, like wings brushing against each other. It is almost hypnotic. The woman rises and begins hanging several cloths across a wooden beam near the doorway. They flutter softly in the night air, transforming the entrance into a curtain of pale ripples. For a moment, the space feels like a sanctuary built from nothing but fabric and patience. You feel a sense of peace settling around you as the night deepens outside. A gentle conversation begins between the man and woman, their voices low and softened by the rhythm of their work. You cannot hear every word, but you sense that they are discussing the coming days, the expected temperature, and whether they will sleep indoors or on the roof tomorrow night. Experts continue to interpret how families chose their sleeping arrangements based on seasonal winds and nightly temperature shifts. But watching this couple, you understand that the decision was often practical, flexible, guided by experience rather than strict custom. You turn toward the exit, letting your fingers trail briefly along a hanging strip of linen. It sways gently, brushing your hand as if to offer a final touch of coolness. The air outside feels warmer again, but that soft sensation lingers on your skin, making you feel oddly refreshed. Behind you, the lamplight flickers one last time, illuminating the piles of fabric like pale waves frozen in place. The room fades quietly into the background as you step into the open lane. The warmth of the night settles over you once more, but now you carry a sliver of comfort with you. Linen has wrapped itself around your thoughts, promising that even in a blazing world, there are materials gentle enough to soothe you toward sleep. Ahead, the village continues to hum in its nighttime rhythm, and you follow the path, ready to discover the next cooling secret hidden in the desert shadows. You walk slowly through the night-soaked village until you hear the faint trickle of water coming from somewhere ahead. The sound is soft, almost shy, yet in a place as thirsty as ancient Egypt, even the gentlest murmur of water carries weight. You follow the noise down a sloping path between mud-brick walls until you reach a small open space lit by the glow of a single clay lamp perched on a ledge. Its light reveals several water jars arranged in an artful cluster, each with a dampened cloth draped over its round shoulders. You step closer, drawn by curiosity. The air around the jars feels different, slightly cooler, slightly moister, as if the water is whispering its own quiet magic into the desert night. You stretch out your hand, hovering just above the cloth. The sensation is subtle but real. A faint breath of coolness lifts upward each time the breeze passes across the damp fabric. It is like the jars are exhaling small pockets of night air. You crouch beside one jar and inspect its surface. The clay is porous, made to allow water to slowly seep through and evaporate. Egyptian households used these vessels constantly, and clay jars like these appear in excavations so often that anyone studying the era quickly recognizes their importance. A detail frequently noted in archaeological reports is that these jars acted not only as water storage, but also as natural cooling devices, working with the environment instead of against it. You watch as a bead of moisture glistens along the jar's side before disappearing into the air. Beside you, a young boy sits cross-legged, with a small reed scoop. He dips it into a shallow basin and carefully pours water over the cloth covering the jars. His movements are gentle, practiced. He looks up at you briefly, then returns to his task without hurry. You can almost hear the unspoken instruction from his parents. Keep the jars damp, keep the air moving, keep the family cool enough to sleep. A woman steps into the space carrying another strip of linen. She wrings it out with a twist of her hands, letting droplets fall onto the packed earth. The ground hisses faintly as the droplets vanish. She drapes the cloth over a jar, smooths it down, then adjusts the position so the passing breeze will catch it just right. A lesser noted household insight documented in some reconstructions suggests that people positioned jars based on the direction of prevailing winds, ensuring maximum evaporation. Watching her deliberate adjustments, you believe it. You rise and wander around the small cooling setup. A clay tray nearby holds several shallow bowls filled with water. A child's handprint is preserved in the dried mud beside them, perhaps made earlier when the bowls were first arranged. The water inside each bowl reflects the moonlight, forming tiny silver mirrors. You tap one lightly and watch ripples shimmer across the surface. As you move, you notice a cluster of small holes punctured into the courtyard wall. At first, they look like mere imperfections, but as you lean closer, you feel a light current of air slipping through them. The openings are angled upward, guiding the breeze toward the jars. A few scholars propose that such built-in ventilation holes served as primitive airflow enhancers, channeling nighttime wind toward key cooling spots. Whether the explanation is entirely correct or simply intuitive interpretation, you feel the effect clearly on your skin. A man enters the area, carrying a pair of large ceramic pots balanced by a wooden yoke across his shoulders. His steps are slow but steady. He lowers the pots onto the ground with a relieved sigh, then kneels to uncover them. The scent of cool water wafts upward, earthy and clean. He dips a cup into one pot and offers it to a child, who drinks with grateful gulps. Fresh water at night is a quiet luxury, one that families safeguarded carefully. The man glances at you before pouring the remaining water into one of the evaporative basins, ensuring nothing goes to waste. You step aside as he arranges the jars in a new configuration, forming a line that leads directly into the open space of the courtyard. The movement gives you a better view of how the cooling system extends outward. Damp cloths hang from a rope strung between two wooden poles. As the wind pulls them back and forth, droplets glide along the fibers and fall softly onto the packed earth below. The moist ground cools quicker than dry sand, creating a pocket of relief for anyone resting nearby. You place your hand near the damp earth and feel the temperature difference. Small, subtle, but meaningful. You imagine lying here with your back pressed to a woven mat, letting the air lift the heat from your skin as the cooling system works quietly around you. A dog sleeping nearby seems to understand this instinctively. It has sprawled directly on the moistened patch of ground, tongue lolling, eyes half open with contentment. In the corner, a set of clay funnels catches your attention. They are arranged in a way that allows water to drip slowly from one vessel into another. Each drip produces a soft sound like a measured heartbeat. Some modern researchers believe these setups may have helped control evaporation rates, or simply served as a soothing nighttime rhythm in households that valued quiet. The steady drip feels almost hypnotic as you listen. A young woman steps into the space, carrying a woven basket filled with herbs. She pulls out a handful of dried leaves and sprinkles them into the water in the nearest bowl. Immediately, the scent of mint rises and blends with the moisture in the air. There is a gentle cooling effect on your senses, even if it is more emotional than physical. Ancient Egyptians valued fragrance deeply, and they understood that the mind could be cooled long before the body caught up. You find yourself breathing slower, steadier. The woman approaches another bowl and crushes a pinch of herbs between her fingers before letting them fall into the water. You ask yourself whether this practice was for aroma, for insects, or simply because tradition demanded it. Researchers still discuss the exact purpose of these household scents, but every explanation feels plausible as the smell begins to drift around you, calming and refreshing. As you continue observing, a small group of family members gathers around the jars, adjusting cloths, refilling basins, and preparing the cooling zone for the night. Their coordination is smooth, almost rehearsed. They do not rush. They do not complain. They simply do what they have done every evening of their lives, trusting that water, clay, and wind will offer what comfort they can. You take one final look at the scene. The water jars gleam under the lamplight like quiet guardians of the night. The damp cloths sway in slow arcs. The breeze picks up, tugging coolness from every surface. You feel the temperature shift again, a soft brushing of relief that settles gently across your skin. This small corner of the village feels like a sanctuary, crafted entirely from patience, ritual, and the wisdom of generations. Cooling with water is not dramatic, it is not instant, but here, in the desert, it becomes a language everyone understands, a nightly hope whispered through droplets and breeze. You turn toward the open path, ready to discover the next secret waiting in the shadows of the ancient night. You continue along the winding lane, the moist scent of water fading behind you as the night opens into a broader horizon. The stars feel brighter now, as if the sky has tilted closer to the earth. Ahead, a tall shape rises above the rooftops. At first, it looks like an ordinary mud brick tower, but as you approach, you notice the openings carved high on each side, angled to catch the moving air. You pause, sensing that this structure holds one of the oldest clever tricks in the desert world. You draw nearer, placing your hand on its base. The tower is cool in some spots, warm in others, the temperature shifting like scales of a living creature. A soft breath of air escapes from one of the angled slits, brushing against your cheek, and you suddenly understand why families built these odd-looking forms near their homes. Air movement was everything. In a land where heat ruled the day, people learned to shape wind just as they shaped clay. One widely recognized observation in architectural studies is that early Egyptians experimented with structures that guided air downward, creating circulation inside otherwise stagnant rooms. This tower, simple as it looks, belongs to that lineage. It acts like a natural funnel, coaxing wind from above and delivering it directly into the space below. You stand still for a moment, enjoying the gentle draft as it slips past you. A man climbs a short ladder leaning against the tower. He peeks into one of the upper slots, checking the angle. His movements suggest routine rather than curiosity. He adjusts a wooden plank inside, changing the direction the breeze will flow. A small but telling detail preserved in ancient building remnants suggests that households sometimes fitted these towers with adjustable slats or mats, allowing them to redirect airflow depending on the season. Watching him now, you see the logic with your own eyes. He nods at his work and descends, wiping his hands on his tunic. A child emerges from behind the structure, clutching a handful of palm fibers. The child stuffs the fibers into a clay frame at the tower's base, creating a rough filter to catch dust before the air enters the living space below. This small touch amazes you. Even in a time before mechanical fans, Egyptians considered airflow not just in terms of temperature but also quality. You walk around the tower, studying each opening. Moonlight paints the slits in silver, making them look like eyes staring outward across the desert. As the breeze shifts, the tower hums softly with a low tone, almost like a sigh. You place your ear near one of the openings and hear air slipping inside with a steady murmur. It sounds like the tower is whispering, telling you stories carried from distant dunes. A woman appears beneath the tower carrying a wicker basket. She lifts it onto a low shelf positioned right under the airflow, where the breeze cools whatever lies inside. You peek toward the basket and see food wrapped in linen, perhaps leftovers from the evening meal. Some researchers speculate that families stored perishables in precisely these breezy spots to keep them from spoiling in the heat. Even if the cooling effect was mild, it made a difference in a climate where everything fought to stay fresh. You follow the woman inside a dim room connected to the base of the tower. The moment you enter, the air changes. It moves, gently but firmly, creating a pocket of relief that feels heavenly compared to the heavy warmth outside. The breeze spills into the room like a steady river, flowing from above and escaping through a slit in the opposite wall. You close your eyes for a moment, savoring the sensation. Inside, two older men sit on woven mats, enjoying the airflow. They lean back against the mud brick wall, faces lifted slightly toward the draft. Their posture tells you everything. This is the evening refuge, the quiet corner where people gather to let the heat drain from their bones. One of the men opens his eyes and glances your way. He gives a small nod, acknowledging your presence without needing to speak. A piece of linen hangs from a wooden peg near the tower base. The woman retrieves it, dips it in a bowl of water, and unfurls it across the opening. As the breeze passes through the damp cloth, it cools even more, sending a faint shiver of relief through the room. A less discussed insight among climate historians notes that evaporative cooling was often layered in simple ways, each element enhancing the next. Seeing it done here so casually makes the knowledge feel alive. You watch as the older men shift their mats closer to the airflow, settling in for what appears to be a long conversation. Their voices rise and fall in low tones, creating a soothing cadence. You catch fragments of words, references to the previous day's labor, to the upcoming flood season, to the arrival of a distant relative. Their manner suggests that this cool corner is as much a social spot as it is a functional one. A young girl enters with a clay cup filled with crushed herbs. She sets it beneath the airflow so the scent can disperse throughout the room. In a moment, a delicate hint of dried basil drifts through the space, placing an herbal freshness in the moving air. Some specialists in ancient domestic practices believe that scented air was used not only for comfort, but also for spiritual reassurance, with the breeze carrying blessings from one room to another. You inhale, letting the herb-laced wind soothe your mind. As you step back outside, the tower looms above you like a guardian of the night. Its shape is plain, almost homely, yet its purpose feels profoundly important. It catches the faintest winds from the desert and transforms them into comfort for the weary. You run your hand along the mud brick surface once more. It feels cool now, almost chilled at the base, showing how the wind has done its work. You tilt your head back to watch the top of the tower disappear into the star-scattered sky. The ancient world knew many ways to survive the heat, but this rising structure feels like one of its quiet masterpieces. No gears, no metal, no noise, only wind, earth, and human understanding woven together into a simple but brilliant design. As you turn away, the breeze brushes the back of your neck, guiding you toward another part of the village. The night is deepening, and each step leads you to another secret woven into the cool heart of the desert. You drift back into the open lanes of the settlement, letting the night guide you without urgency. The air feels livelier here, stirred by voices, footsteps, and the distant clatter of pottery lids. You follow the sounds as they grow clearer, and soon you find yourself near a cluster of stalls arranged loosely along a wide path. Lamps glow in clay niches, casting soft circles of golden light. It dawns on you that you have stumbled into one of ancient Egypt's night markets, a world that blossoms only after the sun finally loosens its grip. You step forward and immediately feel the atmosphere change. The heat is still present, but here it mingles with movement, laughter, and scents that help distract you from the heaviness clinging to the air. A vendor waves a palm frond fan lazily, keeping insects away from a tray of figs. The sweet smell drifts toward you, tempting you to stop and taste. The vendor smiles with half-closed eyes, his expression telling you he has grown accustomed to these warm nights, perhaps even fond of them. A well-established point in social history is that many communities in hot climates shifted much of their daily activity into the evening, not out of luxury but survival. As you wander deeper into the market, you see the truth of it everywhere. People shop, trade, chat, barter, and joke as if the night were their true day. The faint breeze weaving through the stalls seems to energize everyone, giving the space a gentle pulse. You pause near a group of musicians playing hand drums and rattles made of hollow gourds. Their rhythm provides a heartbeat for the entire market. You watch as a dancer sways in slow, relaxed arcs, letting her linen garments ripple around her. The movement mesmerizes you. Even the music feels adjusted to the heat, slow enough not to raise the body's temperature, but steady enough to make the moment feel alive. A few steps away, a woman seated behind a low table arranges small jars of scented oils. She gestures for you to come closer. You lean in and catch a soft aroma rising from one jar, perhaps made of marjoram or chamomile. She dips a reed stick into the jar and lets a drop fall onto your wrist. The scent opens gently, soothing and light. Some researchers today suggest that certain aromatic oils helped ease heat-induced tension, though perhaps the emotional calming mattered just as much. You move on and soon find yourself at a stall selling woven mats. A man sits cross-legged, working palm fiber strips into delicate patterns. He glances up and gives a brief smile before returning to his weaving. You notice that the mats are thin and airy, perfect for sleeping on rooftops or in courtyards during the hottest months. A note often mentioned by textile historians is that mats like these lifted the body slightly above the heated ground, allowing airflow beneath the sleeper. It is a modest solution, but in a place where the earth radiates warmth long after sunset, even a little elevation makes a world of difference. A child runs past you, clutching a clay cup filled with cool water. She drinks eagerly and wipes her mouth on her sleeve. Her mother follows behind, gently reminding her not to spill. The cup intrigues you. It is made of porous clay, just like the jars you saw earlier, and beads of moisture shed from its surface. The cup itself cools the water it holds through evaporation. These small innovations feel like tiny triumphs in a world where heat never fully rests. You stroll toward the far end of the market where the crowds thin out. A group of older men sits on low stools around a small charcoal brazier. It glows faintly, used less for warmth and more for roasting a handful of seeds. You catch the nutty scent drifting around them. They speak in hushed voices, discussing tonight's breeze, tomorrow's tasks, and the coming Nile flood. Some specialists in ancient lifeways point out that night gatherings helped communities maintain strong social bonds in climates where daylight work demanded constant movement and endurance. Watching these men, you understand how vital such moments must have been. A girl approaches one of the men and hands him a woven pouch. He opens it and removes a small clay figure shaped like a frog. It looks simple but intentional. He chuckles softly, showing it to his companions. She must have crafted it earlier, maybe during a moment of boredom. You smile at the playfulness of it. Small, handmade objects like this often appear in excavations, and their purpose is still a topic of discussion among researchers. Some interpret them as toys, others as charms, and some lean toward symbolic offerings. As you watch the men admire the piece, the possibilities all feel believable. You veer toward another row of stalls where food is being prepared. Skewers of roasted onions and herbs sizzle gently over a clay burner. The smell makes your stomach rumble faintly. A woman fans the coals with slow, rhythmic motions, guiding heat rather than fighting it. She sets a skewer aside to cool, sprinkling a pinch of salt over it. You notice several families sitting nearby on mats, sharing small plates and cups. They speak with relaxed voices, their faces softer now that the worst of the heat has passed. A breeze flickers through the market and lifts your hair with a gentle tug. The sensation makes you close your eyes for a moment. Around you, lantern flames dance, and the palm frond awnings flutter lightly. The entire market responds to the wind like a single living being. You sense conversations pausing, bodies adjusting, shoulders relaxing. In a land where the breeze is something rare and treasured, each gust feels like a gift. When you open your eyes again, you notice an elderly woman, sitting beside a stack of clay pots. She beckons you closer with a crooked finger. When you approach, she lifts one of the pots and tilts it toward you. Inside is a mixture of herbs and a powdery substance that smells faintly of crushed lotus. She explains with a smile that some households sprinkled mixtures like this onto sleeping mats for a faint cooling effect or for fragrance that made hot nights easier to endure. Whether the effect was physical or simply comforting, you feel the care behind the tradition. You walk deeper into the flickering maze of lights, soaking in every detail. Sounds layer over each other. The clink of pottery, the hum of conversation, the occasional bray of a donkey in the distance. The night has turned into its own kind of day, shaped entirely by heat and the ways people learn to survive it. As you wander, you notice a group of youths clustered around a small game board, scratched into the packed earth. Pebbles serve as game pieces, and each move is made with dramatic flair. The onlookers cheer softly, leaning in to observe the next play. Games like these have appeared in tomb scenes and household items, hinting at how evenings brought both respite and camaraderie. Their laughter brightens the air, stretching warmth into joy rather than discomfort. You move toward the edge of the market, where lanterns thin out and darkness returns. You look back for a moment. The night market glows like a constellation on the ground. People lean into conversation, share food, mend tools, exchange gifts, and relax in the cooled hush of evening. Life reorganizes itself gracefully around the sun's demands. Instead of resisting the heat, they have learned to dance around it. You inhale the last drift of spices and cooled clay and step away from the market path. The village grows quieter as you continue forward. The breeze follows you, faint but loyal, reminding you that the desert night still has more wisdom to share. You continue along the moonlit path, letting the soft pulse of the night market fade behind you. With each step, the sounds quieten. The air grows still again, warm but gentler, as though the breeze is resting between breaths. Ahead, you spot a low doorway leading into another part of the village. You duck inside and find yourself in a dim space filled with woven mats stacked neatly against a wall, their shadows creating a pattern of stripes across the floor. You step closer, brushing your fingers across the top mat. The texture surprises you. It is firm yet springy, made from tightly woven palm fibers that still carry the faint scent of the grove where they were harvested. In Egypt's unforgiving heat, beds needed to help the body breathe, not trap the warmth beneath it. One clear observation noted in ancient household reconstructions is that mats like these were essential tools for airflow. Sleeping on raised, airy surfaces allowed circulation to pass beneath and around the body, easing the oppressive heat of the ground. A man sits nearby, legs crossed, repairing a worn section of one mat. His fingers move steadily, pulling new palm fibers through the weave and tightening them with a practiced tug. He glances up, nods once, then returns to his task. You watch how his hands work, the calmness of his rhythm mirroring the slow pace of the night itself. These mats are more than bedding. They are part of the nightly ritual of preparing the body and mind for rest. Beside him, a young boy sorts through bundles of palm fibers. He separates the thicker strands from the thin ones, setting aside the most flexible pieces for weaving. A noticeable point mentioned by specialists who study ancient materials is that palm fiber had to be carefully selected. Too stiff, and the mat would poke the skin. Too thin, and it would sag. The boy seems to know exactly what he is looking for as he taps each strand lightly against his finger. You kneel to examine one of the finished mats spread on the floor. It lies perfectly flat, its surface cool where the shadows touch it. You press your palm against it. The weave creates tiny air channels, each one allowing the faint breeze to slip through. It is a simple design, yet incredibly effective. You imagine yourself lying there, feeling the night air travel beneath your back. A little girl enters the room holding a small clay bowl filled with crushed herbs. She kneels and sprinkles some of the mixture across a freshly woven mat. The scent rises instantly, a mixture of dried mint and something slightly floral. A few modern researchers exploring ancient domestic habits suggest that some households used herbs not only to scent their mats, but also to discourage insects from settling too close during the night. The girl pats the mixture softly into the weave, careful not to break the fragile fibers. You stand and move to another corner of the room, where thicker mats are rolled tightly and tied with strips of linen. These look sturdier and slightly elevated, perhaps for older family members who preferred more support. A curious detail noted in certain excavation reports describes how wealthier households sometimes added wooden frames beneath their mats, lifting them a few inches higher to enhance airflow. You see one such frame leaning against the wall, its smooth edges worn from years of use. A woman enters carrying a bundle of reed sticks. She places them on the floor and spreads them out like fan blades. With gentle precision, she ties them together, creating a narrow roll. She runs her hand along it, testing the firmness. It appears to be a headrest, designed to keep the neck elevated while allowing air to circulate freely. Some scholars still discuss how widely these headrests were used for nighttime comfort versus ceremonial settings, but standing here, you sense their practicality. She picks up one completed headrest and sets it atop a woven mat. The shape looks unusual compared to modern pillows, but the logic is clear. Heat builds wherever the body settles. Lifting the head a few inches allows the breeze to reach the neck and shoulders, cooling the blood as it travels. You imagine lying on one, your skin exposed to the night air, your breath deepening under the stars. A faint rustle draws your attention. A cat slips inside the room, its tail held high as it weaves between the legs of the man repairing the mat. It curls into a coil on one of the completed mats and settles almost immediately. You smile, recognizing that animals often know comfort better than people. The cat closes its eyes, soaking in the cool fibers beneath it, purring softly. The man finishes his repair and lifts the mat toward a nearby window. A gentle breeze flows through the opening, stirring the loose fibers. He nods as if satisfied, then hands the mat to a woman waiting by the doorway. She carries it into the courtyard, presumably setting it out where someone will sleep later tonight. Watching her, you sense how deeply connected the people are to the materials they use. Every mat, every fiber, every knot is crafted with care and meant to last through countless hot nights. You turn to explore the room further. On one shelf, you find small clay weights used to press freshly woven mats and help them settle into shape. Nearby sits a jar filled with oil used for conditioning palm fibers, making them pliable and smooth. The scent rising from the jar is faintly sweet, like pressed seeds warmed by the sun. A boy notices your interest and lifts a mat to show you something beneath it. A thin layer of sand has been brushed, smooth and lightly moistened. He explains with a gesture that some families spread damp sand beneath their mats to create an extra touch of evening coolness. The moisture in the sand evaporates slowly, cooling the mat above. Whether this was common or only practiced in certain households remains a point of discussion among those who study ancient domestic techniques, but the method seems ingenious as you feel the faint chill rising from it. You stand again and look around the room. Everything here feels handmade, intentional, shaped by the daily battle with heat. No one complains, no one rushes. The creation of these mats is part of the gentle rhythm of life, a way of preparing not just the body, but the spirit for nightfall. The woman with the herbs begins packing her mixture into a small pouch, humming a quiet tune. The sound blends with the light rustle of palm fibers and the soft breathing of the sleeping cat. The atmosphere is peaceful, warm, and surprisingly soothing. You realize that this room, filled with simple mats and natural scents, holds its own kind of sanctuary. Here, the heat is acknowledged but not feared. You trace one last finger along the cool surface of a finished mat, imagining the comfort it will bring someone tonight. Then you step back into the night air, ready to continue your journey through the world of ancient sleep. You continue wandering through the quiet lanes until the scent of greenery begins to rise around you. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. It feels like stepping through an invisible curtain. The desert still breathes its warm breath across your neck, but beneath it comes a cooler, softer aroma. You follow the scent around a bend in the path, and suddenly find yourself standing before a wide, walled garden. its entrance framed by tall reeds and hanging vines that sway gently in the night breeze. You step inside, and the air shifts instantly. The temperature drops just enough for your shoulders to relax. The garden feels like another world entirely, a little miracle nestled inside the harsh landscape. You hear the faint rustle of leaves, the hum of insects softened by distance, and the quiet trickle of water from somewhere deeper in the shadows. Moonlight filters through branches overhead, painting delicate patterns across the packed earth. One frequently cited point in environmental studies is that ancient Egyptians used gardens not only for beauty and food, but for microclimates. By planting trees and shrubs strategically, they created pockets of shade and moisture that cooled the air far more effectively than bare courtyards could. As you walk along a narrow pathway, you feel that truth with every step. The hard heat of the desert falls away, replaced by the hush of living things breathing in the dark. You pause beside a wide basin of water, lined with smooth stones. The surface reflects the moon like a polished mirror. Close by, clusters of papyrus plants sway gently, their long stalks bending with each tiny gust. A young girl kneels at the water's edge, dipping a clay cup into the pool. She splashes some water onto the nearby leaves, letting droplets cling to them like tiny jewels. Some specialists today point out that lightly watering plants at night increased humidity just enough to cool the surrounding air. Watching the girl at her task, you realize how instinctive the practice must have been. Further along the path, you find a fig tree with thick, broad leaves. They cast generous shadows, even in the dim moonlight. Beneath the tree sits a woven bench where an elderly couple rests side by side, speaking in hushed voices. Their words float softly through the dark, carried by the breeze and softened by the leaves overhead. You can almost feel the comfort they draw from simply sitting here, letting the night and the plants do their quiet work. As you continue, you notice something surprising. A cluster of small clay pots has been partly sunk into the ground beneath a section of young trees. Their cool surfaces gleam faintly in the starlight. A lesser-known insight from some excavation notes describes how gardeners occasionally used buried pots to retain moisture in the soil, helping gardens stay cool even during the hottest days. You kneel and touch one of them. The earth around it feels damp and cool, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the path you walked earlier. A boy runs past you, laughing as he shakes a branch of an acacia tree. The leaves rustle above him, releasing a gentle rain of cooler air that settles around you like a soft sigh. His laughter echoes lightly through the garden, blending with the whisper of the branches. You smile, absorbing the moment. Acacia trees often appear in ancient art, and botanists believe their shade played a role in creating comfortable resting spots throughout villages. Standing under one now, you understand why. You follow a stone path deeper into the garden. The walls here are high and covered with climbing vines, their tendrils wrapped around wooden supports. You run your fingers along one of the vines. It feels cool and alive, pulsing faintly with the day's stored moisture. A woman steps into view carrying a small basket of fresh leaves. She plucks a few and sets them on a stone table beside you. Their scent blossoms into the air, sharp but refreshing. Some researchers suggest that certain garden plants were chosen as much for their aromas as their shade, acting like natural perfumes that made the heat feel less oppressive. She crushes one leaf gently between her fingers, releasing an even stronger fragrance. She smiles as she lets you smell it. The scent dances through your senses like a breeze made of mint and honey. You thank her with a nod, and she continues on her way, moving deeper into the green labyrinth. You reach the center of the garden, where a larger pool glimmers. Stone benches circle the water, and willow branches droop low enough to brush the surface. The breeze that skims across the pool carries a touch of the chill trapped in the deeper water. You close your eyes for a moment and let that cool breath wash over your face. The garden hums around you, alive but peaceful, its sounds weaving together into a lullaby. Near the pool stands a clay structure shaped like a small shrine. At its base, you notice tiny carved channels running toward the water. One interpretation put forward by some historians is that these channels may have been part of irrigation or drainage systems designed not only to water the plants, but also to help regulate the garden's nightly coolness. You trace one channel with your finger, feeling dried mud and the memory of water. A sudden flutter draws your attention upward. A pair of nightbirds glides between branches, their wings brushing the leaves with soft whispers. Their silhouettes dart and turn in the air, graceful and almost silent. The movement adds life to the still garden, making you feel as though you are walking through a living tapestry of sights, scents, and sounds. You continue wandering until you reach a low stone bench beneath a sycamore tree. The leaves ripple gently, shimmering like the scales of a dream creature catching moonlight. Sycamores appear again and again in Egyptian mythology, often linked to protection and comfort. The tradition seems fitting as you sit on the cool stone. The air beneath the tree feels noticeably fresher, touched by the rustling canopy above. The heat does not vanish entirely. It lingers like a memory, a reminder of the day's intensity. But here, surrounded by trees, water, and moonlight, the edge of that heat softens. You imagine families gathering here after sundown, spreading mats beside the pool, or sitting under the sycamore to let the night breeze drift across their skin. Perhaps they whispered stories, or simply rested in silence, allowing the garden to cool their thoughts and bodies. As you stand to leave, the garden seems to breathe with you. The plants sway gently, the water ripples, and the air moves in slow, patient patterns. You walk toward the exit, feeling the temperature rise slightly as you approach the outer wall. But you carry the garden's calm with you, a quiet echo of green air lingering on your skin. Stepping back into the warm lane, you inhale the drier desert air and look back once more. The garden glows faintly behind the vines, a pocket of cool wisdom tucked into the night, and you continue onward, ready to explore the next secret held by this ancient world. You walk deeper into the village, leaving the cool garden behind you. The warm air settles around your shoulders again, but now it feels softer, as if the memory of leaves and water lingers on your skin. Ahead, the faint, rhythmic flutter of something catches your ear. It is a steady movement, gentle and repetitive, like wings sweeping the air. You follow the sound until you reach an open room lit by a single oil lamp. As you step inside, the space reveals itself slowly. Linen curtains sway at the windows. Reed baskets sit in neat rows along the walls, and in the center of the room stands a young servant gently waving a palm leaf fan over an older woman reclining on a low bench. You watch the fan rise and fall in quiet arcs, creating breezes that stir the warm air into something lighter and more bearable. For a moment you simply observe, letting the repetitive movement soothe you. In ancient Egypt, fans were more than tools. They were symbols of care, attention, and comfort. A detail often highlighted in museum displays is that fans made from palm, feathers, or reeds appear frequently in depictions of both daily life and ceremonial scenes. They show up in the hands of servants, family members, even deities. Here, in this modest room, you can see why. The breeze produced by the palm leaf is not strong, but it creates a noticeable shift in temperature. You feel it slip across your cheek where you stand near the doorway. The servant's expression is calm, focused. She moves her wrist with practiced ease, ensuring that every sweep of the fan creates a pocket of gentle airflow. Beside the reclining woman sits a small table. On it lies a beautifully crafted feather fan, its surface gleaming in the lamplight. You step closer to examine it. The feathers are arranged in an elegant arc, dyed in subtle shades of brown and cream. The handle is made of polished wood, carved with simple geometric lines. An inscription near the base suggests it belonged to someone of standing. Some people today describe objects like this as personal luxury items, but the Egyptians saw them as necessities during sweltering nights. The older woman notices your curiosity and smiles faintly. She gestures toward the fan, as if inviting you to lift it. You pick it up with care. It feels surprisingly light, almost fluid in your hand. You wave it gently and feel a soft current of air drift upward. The feathers move smoothly, whispering with each stroke. It is easy to imagine someone using this exact tool to create a breeze while telling stories under the stars. In one corner of the room, a boy sits weaving a new reed fan. His fingers move with quiet concentration, bending and binding the reeds into a flat circular shape. A point sometimes mentioned by researchers is that these fans were cheap to produce and widely available, making them essential household items. The boy ties off the edge with a firm knot, trims a stray strand, and sets the finished fan aside. He reaches for another bundle of reeds without pause. You settle onto a small mat near the wall to watch him work. The soft clacking of reeds echoes gently in the room. It blends with the steady motion of the palm leaf fan across the space. Together, the sounds wrap the air in a musical rhythm, a kind of nighttime lullaby produced not by instruments but by simple tools. A woman enters carrying a bowl of cool water. She sets it beside the older woman and dips a cloth into it. She presses the damp cloth to the woman's forehead, then begins to wave a small hand fan made of thin bark strips. The combination of water and airflow creates a faint chill that you can almost feel from where you sit. Several researchers who study ancient domestic habits note that combining moisture with fanning was an effective strategy for cooling the body quickly, especially in the hottest months. You notice a narrow shelf near the window holding several types of fans. Some are plain and utilitarian, others are more ornate, decorated with intricate patterns. One particular fan catches your eye. It is made of ostrich feathers, arranged in a wide half circle. The feathers shimmer in the lamplight, their edges soft and luxurious. Items like this often appear in tomb paintings, carried by servants in processions. But here, in this quiet house, it seems to serve a humble purpose, helping a family rest comfortably in the night. A young woman enters the room, fanning herself gently with a small reed fan. She sits down near the window and lets the moonlight touch her face. She leans forward, extending her arm through the open window and testing the breeze outside. She closes her eyes for a moment, then begins waving the fan again with a slow, relaxed motion. Her expression tells you that she is simply trying to make the most of whatever air the night has to offer. The servant who stands near the reclining woman begins to tire. A slight tremble appears in her wrist, though her expression stays composed. The older woman notices and gestures for her to rest. The servant bows her head slightly and steps aside, handing the fan to the young woman sitting near the window. The new fan bearer adjusts her seat and resumes the rhythmic motion, ensuring the older woman remains comfortable. Watching the exchange, you feel a quiet tenderness in the room. The act of fanning someone is intimate, patient, almost meditative. It requires time, attention, and presence. The Egyptians understood the power of such care. Some teachers of Egyptian history note that providing shade or fanning a family member was considered a sign of respect and affection, not merely a chore. You stand and wander toward a basket near the corner, filled with broken fan handles, stray feathers, and reed scraps. It seems to be where old fans rest before they are repaired or repurposed. Among the scraps, you find a small handle carved with the shape of a lotus. The petals are worn down, smoothed by years of use. You run your thumb along the design and imagine the countless nights this handle must have helped someone cool their skin under the desert sky. In another corner, a cluster of feather bundles waits to be assembled. A girl sits beside them, sorting through the feathers with careful hands. She separates the longest ones for large ceremonial fans and places the smaller ones into piles for household use. A few researchers still debate how much of this work was done in homes versus workshops, but standing here, watching her organize the feathers with such awareness, you can easily picture families crafting their own tools to battle the heat. As you watch, a soft gust winds its way through the window, lifting the feathers in tiny waves. You feel the breeze drift toward you, warm but alive. It carries with it the smells of linen, clay, and pressed herbs from the garden. The girl laughs softly as a few feathers float upward, landing on her lap. She gathers them with graceful motions and returns them to their pile. The room grows even quieter for a moment. You notice the sound of crickets just outside, chirping in steady cadence. Their rhythm blends with the ongoing movement of the fans. The gentle airflow flows across your face again, carrying the faint scent of oil from the lamp. It calms you more than you expected. You begin to understand how entire households could gather in rooms like this, trusting that the combined effort of fans, breeze, and companionship would lead them gently towards sleep. After some time, the older woman rises slowly from her reclining bench. She thanks the young fan-bearer with a soft word, then reaches for a small reed fan of her own. As she waves it gently, she steps toward a doorway leading to the rooftop. She moves with patience and familiarity, as though each evening follows this same peaceful rhythm. You watch her disappear up the stairs. Several family members follow, carrying mats and pillows. The young servant gathers the remaining fans and sets them neatly near the wall. She extinguishes the lamp with a careful pinch of her fingers, leaving only the moonlight filtering through the windows. You step outside, letting the cool night air settle against your face. Behind you, the last swaying curtain stirs gently. Ahead, the lane stretches into deeper shadows, ready to reveal yet another part of Egypt's nightly battle against the desert heat. You follow the lane as it curves toward a wider opening between the houses. The sound of flowing water reaches you before you see it, a low and steady murmur that seems to cool the air simply by existing. You step forward, and the rooftops part to reveal a glimpse of the Nile stretching quietly in the moonlight. The river's surface glitters like a sheet of moving silver, reflecting the stars in slow, shifting patterns. You walk closer until you stand at the edge of a small embankment overlooking the water. A soft breeze rises from the river and brushes against your skin with a tenderness you have not felt all night. Its coolness is subtle but unmistakable. It feels like the Nile is breathing out after the long, scorching day, offering relief to anyone willing to come close enough to listen. A frequently mentioned insight among historians of daily life is that proximity to the Nile shaped nearly every aspect of Egyptian existence, including how people slept. The river moderated extremes, slowing the rush of heat and releasing cooler air that drifted inland at night. Standing here, you feel the truth of that knowledge on your own skin. The river's breath is different from the inland breeze. It is softer, moister, more soothing. You notice several families gathered on the slope closer to the water. Some sit on mats, others on bare earth. They lean back on their hands, letting the river breeze wash over them. A group of children plays near the edge, splashing water on their arms and faces, laughing each time the droplets scatter through the air. Their laughter mixes with the gentle lapping of water against the mudbank. A woman kneels beside the water, holding a wide clay bowl. She dips it into the river, lifts it carefully, and pours the water over a strip of linen spread across a stone. She wrings the cloth out and drapes it over her shoulders, sighing softly as the coolness sinks into her skin. Some modern scholars point out that Egyptian families often came to the river at dusk, not only for bathing and washing but to prepare themselves for a cooler sleep. Watching her now, you understand the ritual entirely. A man stands waist-deep in the river, cupping water into his hands and splashing it over his neck and chest. His movements are calm, unhurried. He glances at the sky as if measuring the time by the stars. When he returns to shore, his skin glistens in the lamplight, and the breeze cools him almost instantly. Nearby, a group of young women sits in a circle. One braids another's hair while humming a soft tune. Another washes a small clay pot in the shallows, letting the current carry away the last traces of grain dust. You notice how the river serves as a gathering place as much as a cooling refuge. Even at night, even under the weight of the heat, life pulses here with gentle steadiness. You step onto a stone platform jutting slightly into the water. The stone is cool beneath your feet, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. A narrow wooden boat is tied nearby, rocking gently with the current. A fisherman sits inside it, mending a net. The river breeze lifts his hair as he works. He nods at you without speaking. You sit on the edge of the platform, letting your toes brush the water. The cool sensation spreads through your body almost immediately. You feel your shoulders drop and your breath deepen. A passing gust carries the earthy scent of wet reeds and river mud, grounding and strangely calming. Not far from you, a pair of elders sits on a long bench made of palm trunks. They lean close to the water, dipping their hands and letting the droplets sparkle off their fingers. One of them tells a story in a voice so soft it blends naturally with the river's hum. The tale seems old, perhaps older than the walls behind you. Something about the first flood of a forgotten season, or a boat that followed the stars across the water. People in ancient Egypt often shared stories near the river, drawing comfort from the presence of the current that sustained their world. A faint glimmer catches your eye near the reeds. A young boy kneels there, scooping handfuls of damp mud and shaping them into small objects. He carefully forms a tiny figurine, smoothing its rounded edges. Clay gathered from the riverbank was prized for its coolness and workable texture. Some find traces of children's toys shaped from river mud in excavation sites, suggesting that even play was influenced by the soothing, tactile qualities of the Nile's touch. You stand again and wander a little farther along the bank. A woman spreads her damp linen veil on a rock where the breeze can reach it. She explains with a small gesture that she will use it later when she sleeps on the rooftop. Once dry, the linen will carry the faint memory of the river's coolness. The idea feels poetic and practical at the same time. A young man sits cross-legged nearby, sharpening the blade of a sickle. The soft scrape of stone against metal echoes gently over the water. He pauses occasionally to dip his hands in the river, cooling his palms before returning to his work. Several specialists who examine ancient labor practices point out that nighttime was often the only time people had the energy to prepare tools, cushioned from the heat by the river breeze. As you continue along the embankment, you come upon a small family gathering. Two parents rest on mats while their children float lotus leaves on the water. The leaves drift like little boats, catching the moonlight on their glossy surfaces. You kneel beside them, watching as each leaf glides toward the reeds. The moment feels peaceful, as if the river itself encourages a slower, more thoughtful pace. The sky stretches above you in deep shades of blue and black. Stars shimmer across the surface of the river like scattered jewels. You feel the coolness of the Nile settling into your skin, sinking deeper than any courtyard breeze could reach. It is a comfort that flows from something ancient and wise. Before turning back toward the village, you pause and place your hand gently on the river's surface. The water moves against your fingers with a quiet whisper. It seems to carry stories, memories, and long-forgotten songs. You withdraw your hand and watch the droplets fall back, becoming part of the endless flow again. You take one last breath of the river breeze, letting its gentle coolness linger. Then you turn away, climbing the path back toward the warm lanes. The night feels different now, calmer, balanced by the memory of the Nile's soothing touch. Ahead, the village waits, carrying the next quiet secret of surviving the desert heat. You leave the riverbank with its drifting coolness and turn back into the village lanes. The air grows warmer again, but now the scents rising around you have changed. Instead of clay and wet soil, you start to notice faint traces of perfume drifting through the night. Something floral, something sweet, something warm and resinous that seems to leak gently from doorways and windowsills. You follow the aroma without thinking, letting your feet guide you deeper into the quiet heart of the settlement. You arrive at a small workshop, bathed in lamplight. Curtains sway gently at the entrance, welcoming you inside. The moment you step through, the air wraps around you like a warm, fragrant blanket. The room glows with soft amber light reflecting off polished jars, carved wooden boxes, and shallow dishes filled with shimmering oils. You inhale again, and a delicate blend of lotus, myrrh, and honeyed herbs settles in your chest like a whisper of calm. A young woman stands at a low table grinding something with a stone mortar. She moves slowly, rhythmically, pressing fragrant petals and resin into a fine paste. When she lifts her head, she offers you a tired but kind smile, as if she has been expecting someone to appreciate her work. She scoops the mixture into a small clay bowl and begins pouring warm oil over it with practiced care. The blend releases a wave of scent so soothing you feel your shoulders immediately loosen. A commonly accepted insight among specialists of ancient skincare is that oils played a major role in helping people endure extreme heat. The Egyptians coated their skin with blends of herbs, blossoms, and fats not only for fragrance but also to protect against dryness and irritation. You watch the woman mix and stir, her hands moving with a gentle grace. When she brushes a bit of the oil onto the back of her hand to test it, the skin glows with a soft sheen. A girl enters the room carrying a small basket of fresh petals. She empties the petals onto a woven mat, where they scatter like tiny fragments of moonlit color. She kneels to sort them into piles according to their scent and texture. A less widely discussed detail preserved in certain papyrus instructions suggests that different flowers had different cooling properties. Some, when crushed and blended with oil, soothed heated skin. Others offered a scent that eased tension or quieted the mind. Watching the girl separate the petals, you begin to understand how instinctive these choices must have been. On another mat sits a shallow ceramic bowl filled with a pale green mixture. A man kneels beside it, gently stirring the contents with a reed spatula. The mixture looks creamy and cool, almost like a salve. He gestures for you to come closer. When you do, he dips his fingers into the bowl and smears a small amount onto your wrist. It feels soothing immediately, like water turned soft and thick. He smiles with satisfaction. Several researchers who study ancient cosmetic recipes note that balms like this often contained mineral powders or plant extracts that created a mild cooling sensation on the skin. You look up and notice several hanging threads tied with bunches of dried herbs. They sway slightly in the faint breeze that seeps through the window. Their scents mingle with the oils, creating a tapestry of fragrance that feels almost medicinal. A boy climbs a wooden stool to inspect one of the bundles, poking it gently to check its dryness. Some families believed that certain dried herbs purified the air or discouraged pests. Others simply enjoyed the comfort their aroma brought on heavy nights. A woman sits on a reed mat near the corner, massaging oil into her arms with slow, circular motions. Her eyes are closed, and her face carries an expression of deep relief. She rubs the oil into her skin until it glistens, then lifts her arms to let the breeze from the window pass over them. You can almost feel her body cooling through the simple act of relaxation. A teacher of ancient domestic rituals once noted that evening oiling was as much emotional as physical, giving the body a moment to unwind after hours of heat. A large clay jar catches your eye. It is painted with lotus flowers, each petal delicate and curved. You approach it and lean close. The scent rising from it is soft but unmistakably sweet. Inside is a blend that looks slightly thicker than water, shimmering in the lamplight. The woman grinding herbs explains, with a gesture and a few quiet words, that some families kept scented water near their beds to refresh their skin or dab onto linen before sleeping. Even the faintest fragrance could help someone drift into rest despite the warm night. You walk deeper into the workshop and find a small stone basin filled with warm water. A handful of crushed blossoms floats on the surface like tiny boats. A boy stands beside it, dipping cloth strips into the water and wringing them out. He folds each strip neatly and places it on a tray. These cloths, lightly scented and warm, were often laid across the neck and shoulders before sleep. Several modern analysts suggest the warmth might have helped the body release heat, allowing deeper relaxation. Watching the boy prepare them with care, you realize that comfort can come from surprising directions. Near the back of the room sits a woman holding a delicate wooden comb. She dips the comb into a shallow bowl of perfumed oil, then begins working it through her daughter's hair. Each stroke releases a soft scent that drifts through the air. In ancient households, oil was not only for skin but also for smoothing hair, reducing frizz, and offering a cooling sensation as the breeze passed across the scalp. The mother hums quietly, and the girl leans into the motions, half asleep already. You notice a small clay burner near the wall with a glowing ember in its center. The faint smoke rising from it carries the fragrance of frankincense. Some experts continue to discuss whether these burners played more of a spiritual role or a practical one, perhaps both. The smoke may have signaled protection, purification, or even a simple hope that the room would feel more restful. Whatever its deeper meaning, the scent creates a feeling of grounded calm that settles in your chest. You wander to a narrow shelf near the window where tiny jars are lined up in a neat row. Each one contains a different oil or salve. You pick one up and remove the stopper. The scent is sharp and invigorating, like crushed peppermint. Another jar smells warm and earthy, like cedar. A third carries the soft sweetness of rose. You imagine families selecting oils according to their needs, something soothing for a restless child, something strong to revive tired limbs, something delicate to help ease the mind toward dreams. A small inscription painted on one jar intrigues you. It resembles a symbol associated with a household deity, perhaps suggesting the oil was offered as gratitude after a day of harsh heat. You are reminded that comfort and spirituality often intertwined. Oils were not merely tools but expressions of care, healing, and connection. A faint rustle behind you draws your attention. A woman enters holding a bundle of fresh lotus petals. She arranges them in a bowl, sprinkling them with a few drops of scented water. The bowl glows softly under the lamplight, and the petals release a fragrance so gentle it almost feels cool. Many ancient references speak of lotus blossoms as symbols of renewal, calm, and rebirth. Standing near them now, you feel a soft wave of peace rise through your chest. The workshop quiets as the night deepens. Lamps flicker lower, voices soften. People finish their tasks and prepare the oils, balms, and linens needed for the night ahead. Each object is placed with care, each fragrance released with intention. You feel as if you have stepped inside a living ritual, one that blends practicality with comfort and beauty. When you step back into the lane, the warm air greets you again, but the scents clinging to your skin linger. They make the night gentler, quieter, easier to endure. You breathe deeply, carrying the fragrance with you as you continue into the shadowed pathways of the ancient village, ready for whatever the night reveals next. You return to the open night air, carrying the soft perfume of lotus and herbs with you. The village feels quieter now, as though everyone has slipped into their own preparations for sleep. But as you pass between two narrow houses, a familiar sound breaks the stillness. A high-pitched buzz, a faint whine near your ear. You freeze instinctively, knowing that sound anywhere. Even in ancient Egypt, the nighttime peace came with a small, persistent challenge: mosquitoes. You brush the air near your face and continue down the path. The buzzing grows louder near a cluster of reeds growing behind a house. You edge away from the spot, watching the tall grasses shiver with tiny wings. You remind yourself that the Nile's generosity always came with a price. Warm water and still pools created the perfect gathering places for these unwelcome nighttime visitors. As you walk, you spot a family gathered outside their doorway. The father holds a clay bowl filled with smoldering herbs. He waves the bowl gently, so the scented smoke drifts around the entrance. One broadly supported observation from Egyptologists is that Egyptians used fragrant smoke to discourage insects long before nets or screens existed. The aromas of myrrh, coriander, and certain grasses naturally irritated biting pests. Watching the smoke curl upward now, you see how the practice lived in every household. The mother steps aside to hang a thin linen curtain across the doorway. The cloth is soaked in a mixture of oils. You lean in for a closer look. It smells faintly of mint and something sharper, perhaps a crushed seed. A lesser highlighted detail in some translations of household texts suggests that oil-infused linens served as insect barriers and also masked the scent of sleeping bodies. Whether the logic was scientific or instinctual, the method seems clever. A child emerges from the house carrying a small clay pot filled with sand. She places it on the ground and taps the edge with her hand. You watch as a few larger insects land near the pot, drawn to something inside it. The girl covers the pot quickly, trapping them. You're not entirely sure what lured them there, but you have read accounts from certain archaeological notes that mention bait pots filled with sweetened sand or resin to draw pests away from sleeping areas. The practice seems simple and oddly charming. You move deeper into the village and notice more families taking their own measures. A man sitting beside a rooftop ladder smears a mixture of crushed basil and oil along his arms and legs. He rubs it in thoroughly, making sure every patch of skin is covered. He catches your eye and raises the bowl for you to smell. The aroma is sharp, cool, and slightly bitter. Several modern botanists suggest that basil and similar herbs may have had mild repellent properties. Even if the effect was partly psychological, it gave people a sense of protection during the warm nights. You pause near a wall where someone has hung a cluster of dried garlic bulbs. The smell catches you by surprise. You tilt your head, wondering whether it was used for mosquitoes or simply stored here for cooking. Some experts remain undecided about whether garlic was used as a repellent or merely as food storage, but you can imagine someone believing in its protective scent on nights when insects gathered in relentless clouds. Ahead, you see lantern light spilling from another doorway. You step closer and find a grandmother seated on a reed mat, gently fanning a sleeping infant. Every few moments she dips her fingers into a clay bowl and touches a bit of oil to the baby's arms and neck. The scent that rises from her fingertips is mild, earthy, and calming. She notices your presence and gives you a soft smile. Her expression says everything. This is simply the way things are done. In the warmth of the night, with mosquitoes singing their restless song, families protected one another through old, patient rituals. You crouch beside her and feel the faint breeze of her fan. It is gentle, steady, and warm. But as it moves across the oil she applied, it seems to carry the fragrance outward, creating a small barrier around the child. Some observers of ancient domestic habits believe that fanning did more than cool the skin. It also helped spread scents meant to confuse or repel pests. Watching the grandmother now, her motions are both protective and soothing. As you continue walking, you notice a man setting up a raised sleeping platform in a courtyard. The platform is a wooden frame covered with a loosely woven mat. He sprinkles crushed leaves beneath the frame before placing a reed mat on top. The combination creates a sleeping space lifted above the warm ground, where airflow passes freely underneath. A few entomologists who have studied ancient practices propose that sleeping elevated reduced the number of bites simply because insects gathered near stagnant air closer to the earth. Whether or not he believes the reasoning, the man clearly trusts the habit. Nearby, a woman hangs a thin net, made of fine woven threads above her sleeping spot. The net sways lightly in the breeze. You study its pattern. The weave is imperfect, but tight enough to discourage larger insects when suspended correctly. Nets like this rarely survive in archaeological contexts, but some depictions in art hint that Egyptians may have used similar coverings. As she tucks the edges into small clay weights on the ground, you sense her confidence that she will rest undisturbed. At the edge of the courtyard, two boys sit crushing herbs with smooth stones. Their mother adds a handful of dried flowers and mixes the blend into a shallow bowl with water. The aroma that rises is sharp and resinous. She dips a cloth into the mixture and ties it into a small pouch, then hangs the pouch above their sleeping space. The smell fills the air immediately. Some chemical analyses of ancient residue suggest that Egyptians experimented with various aromatic combinations as protection. Watching this family prepare theirs gives life to those scholarly speculations. You wander toward another house, where a man is stacking fresh reeds near the door. He gestures for you to touch one. The reed is brittle near the top, but moist and cool near the base. He explains through a series of gestures that reeds taken from wetter marshes produce a fresher scent and may discourage insects. Whether this idea was superstition or early ecological observation remains uncertain among researchers, but you can smell the difference in the air. You find yourself swatting at a mosquito buzzing persistently near your ear. Despite the cooling tricks, the insects still find their way around. You laugh softly to yourself. Some things never change, even across thousands of years. A young girl approaches, carrying a clay cup with smoke rising from it. She circles around you, allowing the aromatic smoke to drift in soft rings around your body. The smell is pleasant, slightly spicy. When you thank her, she smiles proudly, as if performing an important task. She sets the cup on a small ledge near the entrance, where the smoke can spread through the courtyard. The method is simple, but suddenly the air feels clearer. In one corner of a rooftop, you notice a pile of dried palm fronds. A woman sits beside them, weaving the thinner strands into small fans. Each time she lifts a new strip, she rubs it with a mixture of oil and crushed herbs. When she waves the finished fan through the air, the scent spreads in slow ribbons. She offers the fan to you. When you take it and flick it back and forth, the breeze carries the smell across your skin and through your hair. It feels refreshing, oddly comforting. You pass a group of elders seated in a semicircle. They talk quietly about the changing winds and how mosquitoes behave at different times of year. One of them stretches out his arms, pointing toward the distant river and then toward the warm dunes. They debate which direction the insects come from and how humidity affects them. Their conversation echoes a theme that researchers still discuss today: the relationship between insect behavior and seasonal shifts in the Nile Valley. Even without scientific terminology, these elders understand the patterns intimately. As the night deepens, you notice that each household performs its own combination of protective rituals. Some rely on smoke, some on oils, some on elevation, some on scent. The village becomes a mosaic of small defenses, each shaped by tradition, observation, and necessity. You walk among them, feeling the layers of scent and smoke drift around you like protective veils. Eventually, you reach the outskirts of the village, where the air grows quieter. You look back and see the faint glow of lamps, the drifting trails of smoke, and the silhouettes of nets and mats arranged for the night. Despite the hum of mosquitoes, everyone seems prepared, each finding their own balance between discomfort and rest. You breathe in the warm night air, grateful for the moments of coolness carried by oils, herbs, and the soft perseverance of families who learn to live gently with the heat. Then you step forward, ready for whatever the desert whispers next. You slip farther from the cluster of homes, following a dusty footpath that leads toward the darker edge of the settlement. The night stretches wide out here, and for a moment the desert feels like a vast animal asleep under the stars. The air carries a faint rustle that you cannot place at first, but as you walk, the sound becomes clearer. It is the soft padding of paws, the flutter of wings, the distant huff of a creature moving through sand. You realize you have entered a place where humans withdraw and animals take over their nightly domain. You pause, listening. Somewhere nearby, a desert fox trots lightly across the ground, its small feet barely whispering against the sand. It stops, looks at you with curious eyes that gleam under the moonlight, then resumes its quiet journey. Its fur fluffs slightly in the breeze, creating pockets of trapped air that help moderate the temperature close to its skin. Observers of desert wildlife today often point out how animals survive by using the environment rather than resisting it. Here, watching the fox move with effortless calm, you see the lesson clearly. A little ahead, you spot a cluster of rocks where a lizard lies motionless. At first you assume it is asleep, but then its throat pulses and its eyes flick open briefly. It shifts only a fraction, pressing its belly closer to the cool surface of the stone beneath it. The night air has cooled the rock slowly, and the creature takes advantage of that natural relief. There is something strangely elegant about the way animals know exactly where comfort hides in the landscape. You step closer and feel the stone with your fingertips. It holds a faint coolness, a subtle reminder that even the desert offers small gifts after dark. Not far from the lizard, an owl perches on a low branch of a desert shrub. It is almost invisible until it turns its head, revealing eyes that catch the moonlight with eerie brilliance. The owl puffs its feathers outward, expanding its body slightly. That simple act helps it regulate temperature and creates insulation as the night grows chillier. Some specialists in animal behavior note that Egyptians must have observed such nightly habits, learning from creatures that had mastered the art of staying cool long before humans shaped mud-brick homes. You imagine people watching these silent, feathered teachers as they perched above camps and gardens. A gentle shuffling sound draws your attention to the left. A donkey stands near a small patch of thorny bushes, nose buried deep as it searches for edible leaves. Each time the breeze lifts, the animal flicks its ears, adjusting its stance to catch the moving air. Donkeys, like many desert creatures, prefer to rest in open spaces at night, where breezes can brush between their coats and keep pests at bay. You wonder whether ancient families learned something from these slow, careful animals. The way they chose sleeping spots, the way they oriented themselves to the wind, the way they trusted the night to care for them. As you continue walking, you notice a faint trail leading between two low dunes. You follow it out of curiosity and soon reach a small clearing where several goat tracks cross in winding, looping paths. The sand here holds tiny pockets of coolness, where animal hooves have pressed deeper into the ground. When you crouch to touch one, you feel that the sand underneath is cooler than the surrounding surface. People in Egypt must have noticed this too. Some archaeological interpretations suggest villagers occasionally gathered cooler sand from shaded spots or animal trails to spread beneath sleeping mats. Whether this was common or rare remains uncertain, but the logic feels entirely possible beneath your fingers. A sudden flutter of wings overhead makes you look up. A small bat swoops in a quick arc across the sky, tracing a looping pattern as it hunts for insects. The bat's movements are swift, controlled, and nearly silent. You watch it glide, twist, and vanish into the darkness. Bats thrive in desert heat by sleeping in shaded crevices by day and staying active through the coolness of night. That stark division between day and night mirrors how Egyptians shaped their own routines, shifting difficult work to early morning or evening hours, saving rest for the moments when the world softened. You move toward a cluster of palm trees near the far edge of the clearing. Their fronds tremble lightly, casting long shadows across the sand. Beneath one of the palms lies a small mound of disturbed sand. You brush it away gently and find the hint of a burrow entrance. It might belong to a desert hedgehog or another small creature. These animals curl into hidden pockets beneath the earth, where the temperature remains more stable. Some natural historians suggest that ancient Egyptians observed such burrows and learned from them, shaping sunken pits or lowered sleeping niches inside homes. Whether this connection was deliberate or intuitive remains an open question among those who study ancient domestic design. You step away from the mound and let the warm air settle again around your skin. The desert wind shifts, carrying with it a faint, musky scent. You glance toward the dunes and see a dark silhouette moving along the ridge. At first it seems too large to be a fox. Then it stops, lifts its head, and you recognize the shape of a wild dog. It stands motionless, catching the breeze. The posture is purposeful and familiar. Desert animals position themselves to take advantage of airflow, even the slightest gust. You imagine how many times ancient Egyptians saw jackals, foxes, and wild dogs do exactly this, learning by silent example. A little farther back toward the village, you spot a small cat perched on a stone wall. It grooms itself lazily, licking its fur and stretching one paw into the air. Dawn is still hours away, but the cat looks content, perfectly adjusted to the rhythm of the night. Cats sought cooler areas instinctively, often climbing to higher perches where breezes could reach them. Their behavior likely influenced how Egyptians arranged their own sleeping spaces, sometimes choosing rooftops or raised beds simply because animals showed them the benefits of elevation. The cat jumps down and pads silently past you, following the path back toward the village. You watch it slip between two houses, tail flicking, clearly heading toward a favorite resting spot. You follow at a distance, stepping lightly until you reach a small courtyard where the cat leaps onto a shaded ledge. It circles once, curls into a tight spiral, and settles its head beneath its tail. The ledge is made of smooth stone and catches the moving air perfectly. You place your hand on it. The surface is surprisingly cool, shielded from the day's heat by the overhang above. You smile at the simple wisdom of the animal. No fan, No elaborate trick, just shade, stone, and airflow. A soft rustle behind you draws your attention. A woman opens her door and places a bowl of water near the ledge. She glances at you, then at the cat, and smiles knowingly. She sets another bowl on the step near her own sleeping spot. People and animals share this night, this heat, and this cooling wisdom. They observe each other, learn from each other, endure the same desert breath. As the woman steps back inside, the breeze shifts again. You inhale, tasting the earth, the sand, the faint scent of herbs on your skin, and something else, something old and wise. The desert creatures have shown you their secrets. The humans have learned from them quietly across generations. You feel the unity of it, the seamless tapestry woven from observation, adaptation, and humble coexistence. You take one last look at the cat, sleeping peacefully on its stone perch, then turn toward the next stretch of the village. The night calls you onward, promising yet another quiet revelation about how ancient people coaxed comfort from a world ruled by heat. You follow the winding path back toward the brighter center of the village, but before long, the houses give way to something grander. Towering shapes rise in the moonlight, their silhouettes sharp and solemn against the sky. The closer you walk, the more the air seems to shift around you, becoming cooler, steadier, as though the night itself kneels in respect. You soon realize what stands before you: a temple complex, its massive columns reaching upward like ancient stone trees. You step toward the entrance, drawn by the deep pools of shadow inside. The moment you cross through the first gateway, the temperature changes noticeably. The heat that clings outside seems to retreat, pushed back by the sheer thickness of the stone walls. One recurring observation in architectural studies is that Egyptian temples maintain surprisingly cool interiors, partly because of their enormous mass and partly because of deliberate design. Standing here, you can feel the truth of it as the air settles against your skin like a calm hand. You walk between two tall columns carved with lotus and papyrus motifs. Their surfaces are cool to the touch, chilled by hours of shade and deep stone density. You glide your fingertips along one of the carvings, tracing the outline of a petal. The stone responds with a cool pulse, as if the building itself breathes slowly in the heat. Inside the open courtyard, you spot a priest moving silently with a clay jar in his hands. He pours water onto the temple floor in thin arcs, creating glistening trails on the stone. The water evaporates slowly, releasing faint coolness into the air. A practical technique often described in ancient temple records mentions that priests regularly watered stones not only to purify sacred spaces, but also to cool them. Here, with the night pressing gently against your shoulders, the method feels both spiritual and practical. You wander deeper into the temple, passing a row of narrow doorways leading to small side chambers. Each room is darker and cooler than the last. Inside one, a few attendants sit on woven mats, sorting offerings brought earlier in the day. Their movements are slow and deliberate. The chamber smells faintly of incense that burned hours ago, mixed with the earthy aroma of stone. One attendant glances toward you and gestures for you to enter. You step inside, and the room embraces you with a coolness almost startling after the desert air. The attendant points to the ceiling where narrow slits allow small threads of moonlight to trickle in. These slits encourage upward airflow, creating subtle circulation in otherwise enclosed rooms. A number of architectural specialists comment on how ancient builders used height, shadow, and selective openings to manipulate air movement inside temples. Here, the idea feels almost instinctive, carved into every stone joint. In the chamber's corner, a priest sits on a low stool preparing incense for the next morning. He grinds resins and herbs carefully, combining them with a small amount of oil. The scent rising from the mixture is complex, warm, smoky, and slightly sweet. He pauses to stretch his shoulders, then holds his hands above a bowl of cool water resting at his feet. The evaporating water sends a faint chill upward. Some interpretations of temple life suggest that priests used cool chambers to rest briefly during long ceremonies. Whether or not this was the intended purpose, the comfort is undeniable. You step back into the broad hallway and notice how the columns form long corridors of shade. Even at night, the dim interior feels like a sanctuary from the lingering warmth. You look upward to the high ceiling, where vast beams of stone cross over one another, like ancient ribs. These beams capture coolness during the darkest hours, releasing it slowly throughout the night. The drop in temperature is subtle but constant, like standing beside a massive, sleeping animal that exhales chilled air. As you walk, the sound of dripping water echoes from somewhere deeper inside the temple. Curious, you follow the faint sound until you reach a small inner courtyard. A stone basin sits in the center, fed by a narrow channel. Water trickles into it, catching the moon's reflection as it moves. A young acolyte kneels beside it, cupping water into his hands and bathing his face. He seems relieved, refreshed. Many studies of sacred architecture note that temple basins served ritual purposes, yet their presence also helped lower the temperature of contained spaces. Standing here, bathed in the cool mist rising from the trickle, the dual purpose becomes obvious. You kneel and dip your fingers into the basin. The water is cooler than the air, stored deep within stone channels that keep it shaded. Droplets cling to your skin as you lift your hand, and the night breeze brushes the moisture into a fleeting chill. The effect is small, but it lingers long enough to make your breath slow, your body soften. In another corner of the courtyard, two priests sit with their backs against a carved wall. They speak quietly, their voices echoing in the open chamber. The acoustics of the temple make even soft whispers seem full and resonant. One priest gestures toward the ceiling, speaking about the movement of stars and the behavior of winds during certain seasons. Another nods, adding his own observation. Modern scholars continue to discuss how deeply temple workers understood environmental patterns. Some believe priests documented wind movements for ritual reasons. Others suggest they simply learned by decades of nightly experience. Listening to them now, you sense both possibilities blending naturally. You step away from the courtyard and enter a low corridor that leads toward the sanctuary. The deeper you walk, the cooler the air feels. The stones here have never seen direct sun. They drink the night and release it slowly, creating an atmosphere that borders on cold. A chill brushes down your spine. You wrap your arms across your chest, surprised by the sudden drop. Inside the sanctuary, a single oil lamp flickers near a carved statue. The flame quivers in the draft moving through the chamber, suggesting hidden air channels behind the walls. Some architects today still study how such chambers maintained constant airflow, but no single explanation satisfies all theories. You touch the stone floor. It feels almost cold, as though the sanctuary has been storing the dusk's shadows all day. A priest enters quietly, carrying a shallow dish of fragrant resin. He places it before the statue, bows his head, and begins fanning the incense smoke with a palm leaf. The slow movement spreads the smell through the chamber without raising the heat. The practice seems so familiar that you smile to yourself. Even here, in the holiest places, cooling and comfort intertwine with devotion. You remain in the sanctuary a little longer, letting the shadows fill your senses. The world outside seems distant, softened, muted. The temple holds its own climate, its own rhythm of breath. You feel restful, grounded, embraced by stone. Eventually, you step back through the corridors, past the columns and the trickling basin. The cool air follows you, clinging to your clothes and your skin. When you emerge through the main doorway, the outside warmth greets you again, yet it feels gentler now, as though your time in the temple has shaped the night itself into something softer. You take one last look at the great stone structure behind you. It rises like a mountain forged by human hands, a sanctuary not only for the gods, but for anyone seeking shade, silence, and small pockets of coolness. Then you turn back toward the village, ready to discover the next place where ancient Egyptians crafted comfort from the desert's breath. You follow the path away from the temple, letting its cool stone breath fade behind you. The night deepens, stretching across the desert like a vast, dark cloak. The village thins, the houses becoming fewer, then vanishing altogether as the land slopes outward toward open sands. You walk along a narrow track, pressed into the earth by generations of travelers, traders, and wanderers. The silence out here feels different from the quiet inside the village. It is broader, emptier, filled with a distant hum that might be wind or might be memory. Ahead, a dim glow flickers against the horizon. You quicken your steps, drawn toward it. As you approach, the glow clarifies into a cluster of lanterns arranged along low stone walls. You smell something earthy, mixed with the faint scent of baked grain and firelight. It becomes clear that you have reached a desert rest station, a place where merchants, caravan workers, and travelers prepare to pause for the night. You step into the settlement and feel the air shift again. Even in this exposed environment, the people here have created small pockets of coolness. Long ago, desert routes were dotted with shelters known for catching nighttime breezes, and many references in old travel accounts describe these stops as essential for anyone journeying across Egypt's vast distances. Now, watching the travelers settle for the night, you understand why. A pair of camels kneels near a wooden beam, their large bodies silhouetted against the lanterns. Their handlers brush them down with palm fiber pads soaked in a bit of water. Each stroke releases a faint cooling mist as the droplets evaporate from the animals' hides. The camels grunt softly, grateful for the relief. The handlers, sweating in the warm night air, also splash some of the leftover water onto their own forearms and necks. You wander near the edge of the camp, where several sleeping platforms are arranged in a semicircle. They are simple structures, raised slightly above the sand, with sturdy legs carved from tamarisk wood. The tops are woven from reeds or strips of leather. A well-known observation among desert travelers of later centuries is that raised sleeping surfaces help air circulate freely under the body. Ancient Egyptians too understood this instinctively. You kneel beside one platform and feel the faint airflow brushing against your fingers from below. Nearby, a merchant spreads a cloth across one of the platforms. The cloth shimmers in the lantern light, lightly dampened so that the breeze will produce gentle, evaporative cooling. He presses the edges down and runs his hand across the surface to smooth out wrinkles. When he finishes, he steps back to admire his work, then nods with satisfaction. You can almost imagine how soothing it must feel when the wind picks up. A small stone shelter stands at the far side of the camp. Its walls are thick, built low to the ground so they catch and redirect the wind. The roof is made from layered palm wood, creating a shaded nook where travelers can sit and rest. A handful of people gather inside, sharing a small meal. Their voices drift outward in soft murmurs. You walk closer and notice how the wind funnels through the gap in the shelter, brushing your skin with a coolness that surprises you. One traveler gestures toward the opening, explaining through slow hand motions that this design encourages airflow, particularly at night when desert breezes strengthen. Some researchers suggest that these shelters are among the earliest examples of intentional wind channeling used for resting places. Standing here now, the simplicity of the idea feels deeply intuitive. A woman sits outside the shelter grinding dried dates and nuts into a paste. She mixes in a little water and rolls the mixture into small spheres. These will become the night's travel food. She wipes sweat from her brow and pauses, positioning herself so the wind hits her directly. Her expression softens as she leans into the breeze. You notice that she has placed her mat beside a stone block that casts a long shadow. Even after sunset, a shadowed surface retains some coolness. She presses her hand against the block, then rests her elbows on it. You mimic her gesture and feel the faint chill lingering in the stone. A curious setup near the edge of the camp catches your eye. Several pottery jars sit inside a shallow pit dug into the sand. The pit is lined with woven mats that have been dampened with river water or perhaps water from a nearby well. A young man pours more water into the pit, letting it soak the mats. The jars remain cool inside the moist enclosure. Some field researchers documenting desert travel routes point out that such pits acted like primitive cooling cells, lowering the temperature around stored water or food. Leaning closer, you feel the coolness rising subtly from the ground. A soft braying draws your attention. A donkey stands tied to a wooden post, stamping its feet rhythmically. A woman kneels beside it, rubbing its legs with a cloth dipped in water. She continues gently, whispering to the animal. The donkey calms and lowers its head. The woman wipes her face with the same cloth, and you can see how the faint coolness restores her. You step toward the lantern-lit gathering where a group of men sits on woven mats arranged in a circle. They speak about their day's travel, the intense sun, the demands of the dunes. One older man gestures toward the low stone shelter and says something that makes everyone chuckle. Though you cannot catch every word, it seems he is joking about how travelers always claim to understand desert winds better than the wind understands itself. Another amusing detail occasionally referenced in translated writings is that travelers often argued playfully about which winds were favorable for sleeping or boiling water. Hearing their laughter now, you see the truth in that light-hearted spirit. In the center of the circle sits a clay bowl filled with water. Occasionally, someone dips their fingers in and flicks droplets lightly across their arms. They share the bowl without hesitation, as though understanding that this brief refreshment belongs to everyone. A traveler seated closest to you lifts the bowl and sets it in your hands. You dip your fingertips in and let the moisture cling to your skin. A breeze sweeps across the camp at that moment, carrying the coolness through your arms like a grateful sigh. A young boy drags a small wooden chest closer to the windward side of the shelter. When he opens it, a stack of light linen wraps spills out. He takes each wrap and shakes it gently so the air can pass through its fibers. Then he lays them neatly on the sleeping platforms. A few experts who study travel culture suggest that merchants and caravans kept special linens reserved for nighttime rest. These linens would absorb the last traces of evening coolness and comfort the body as the wind moved through the camp. You walk back toward the center of the station, where a pair of travelers has begun lighting incense in a shallow dish. The smoke rises in delicate threads, carrying a faint aroma of juniper. It spreads slowly through the camp, calming the air and helping ward off insects drawn to the scent of food or sweat. While incense often held ritual significance, it also served an undeniably practical function during desert travel. The smell mingles with the wind and reaches your nose with subtle sweetness. Another traveler unrolls a mat woven from reeds and places it atop a wooden slat frame. He pats the surface once and nods. Then he gestures for his young daughter to lie down. She climbs onto the mat and stretches out, smiling as the breeze brushes her hair. The father sits beside her, waving a small reed fan lightly across her forehead. You watch the two of them share this simple moment of nightly routine, the desert air soothing their sun-warmed skin. You wander to the outer edge of the rest station where the lantern glow fades. You look back at the camp and see a quiet community forming around the breeze and the night. Travelers share food, cool their skin, soothe their animals, and make small improvements to their sleeping spaces. Everything here is shaped by survival, but also by companionship and shared understanding. The desert around you hums softly. A distant wind travels across the dunes, brushing low shrubs and sending cool air drifting toward the camp. You feel it gather around your ankles, then rise slowly along your body. You breathe in the night and step forward once more. The world feels wider out here, yet more intimate at the same time. And as you continue walking, you know you are following the same rhythms that countless travelers once knew, pursuing coolness through the desert, one quiet step at a time. You walk back toward the glow of the village, letting the desert rest station fade into the darkness behind you. As the path curves between clusters of mud brick walls, you begin to notice how the shapes of the houses subtly change. Some homes face slightly east, others tilt their windows toward the prevailing breeze. The alignment feels deliberate, as though each building carries quiet instructions whispered by generations of builders. You quicken your pace with renewed curiosity, sensing that you are entering a part of the settlement shaped not just by necessity, but by deep thought. The houses here look unassuming at first glance, plain structures softened by moonlight. Yet as you stand still, letting your eyes adjust, you begin to see the careful choices that govern their design. Doorways sit in shadowed niches. Windows are small, placed high, angled to capture passing airflow while avoiding the brutal afternoon sun. Roofs extend slightly beyond the walls, casting shade at precise hours of the day. You run your fingers along one exterior wall and feel its coolness lingering from the earlier evening. It is a quiet testament to the craft of the people who built it. A broadly accepted observation among architectural historians is that ancient Egyptians understood passive cooling long before the term existed. Their homes were shaped to cooperate with the desert's natural forces rather than resist them. Standing here, surrounded by structures that seem to breathe with the night, you feel that wisdom pressing gently against your thoughts. You step into a narrow lane, bordered by closely placed houses. The passageway funnels the wind, turning even a faint breeze into a soft current that brushes your cheeks. A man carrying a basket of pottery walks past you, his tunic fluttering lightly from the airflow. He glances back with a small smile, as if he knows you've discovered one of the village's hidden comforts. These tight lanes serve as wind corridors, cooling the air long after the sun sinks below the horizon. As you continue forward, you reach a wide courtyard, surrounded by 3 houses. A family sits on woven mats in the center, their faces turned toward a small window, positioned high along one wall. A breeze streams from it, enough to rustle stray strands of hair and sway the lantern flame beside them. The window's placement is not accidental. It faces the direction of the cooler night winds. A lesser-known interpretation proposed by some researchers suggests that villagers learned to map local airflow from years of observing dust trails and the movement of incense smoke. Whether or not the method was formal, the results clearly shaped how homes like these were built. A woman stands to greet you. She gestures toward the open courtyard, and then toward the high window. You nod in appreciation, sensing that she understands the night differently than you do. She motions for you to follow her into her home, and you step inside a small chamber with a narrow shaft running from the ceiling to the floor. The shaft is angled slightly, directing air downward. The breeze that enters is soft but constant, cooling the room like a whisper from above. She places her hand above the shaft, allowing the air to brush her palm, then invites you to do the same. When you lift your hand, the whisper of wind pours over your skin. You feel the faint coolness settle into your fingertips, traveling downward in a soothing trail. Some scholars still puzzle over how widespread such shafts were, but the presence of this one suggests that families experimented with airflow in increasingly clever ways. From the chamber, you walk into a larger room, where a family gathers around a low table. Clay mugs sit in front of them, filled with cool water drawn from porous jars. The walls of the room are slanted subtly inward at the top, a design that helps trap cooler air during the night. One family member explains through gestures that the shape encourages heat to rise toward the ceiling, leaving the lower portion of the room more comfortable for sleeping or gathering. A child lies on a mat near the wall, fanning herself lazily while staring upward. You follow her gaze and see a small vent located just below the roof. The vent faces away from the evening sun and catches the nightly breeze perfectly. Even such a small architectural feature creates noticeable relief, drawing hot air upward and letting cooler air settle in the room below. When you step back outside, the family waves to you, and you continue along the lane. You soon reach another cluster of houses built along a slope. The elevation changes subtly, but you feel the difference immediately. The air becomes cooler as it flows downhill, channeled naturally between the homes. Whoever placed these houses understood the terrain deeply. Even a slight incline can guide breezes toward living spaces at night. You climb a few steps, carved directly into the earth, and reach a higher platform, where a small home sits alone. Its doorway is set back beneath a deep overhang. You step beneath it and feel coolness lingering there like a pocket of preserved night. Overhangs like this shield homes from the hardest hours of sunlight and let families store coolness for later. Some architectural theorists believe that these structures mirrored desert caves, where early communities once found refuge from the heat. Whether inspired by memory or necessity, the effect is unmistakable. Inside the home, an elderly man sits by a tiny window carved in an angled triangle. He lifts his hand and motions for you to feel the air passing through it. The triangular shape narrows the breeze into a more focused stream. When you lean in, the rush of cool night air surprises you. The man chuckles softly, pleased by your reaction. He explains with simple gestures that the shape helps strengthen the wind's movement, guiding it deeper into the home. The concept feels almost modern in its elegance. As you leave the home and walk back into the open area, you notice how the settlement's layout encourages air to move like water through channels. Lanes are oriented in multiple directions, some angled toward the river winds, others toward desert breezes. This thoughtful arrangement creates pockets of differing temperatures depending on the time of night. You stop in one such pocket where the breeze quiets, then walk a few steps and feel it return in a sudden, welcome rush. A young woman passes by carrying a basket of reed strips. She pauses to show you a small sketch drawn with soot on the side of a wall. The sketch depicts a home with arrows, indicating the direction of airflow. It looks like a child might have drawn it, but she taps the drawing proudly. The implication is clear. Even the youngest villagers learn how their homes breathe and how to position sleeping spaces to best catch the cooling night winds. You wander to another dwelling, this one built with a second level that opens onto a spacious rooftop. As you climb the steps, the wind strengthens. When you reach the top, you see how the upper walls are angled outward slightly, helping lift rising warm air away from the sleeping area. You lie a hand against the parapet and feel the coolness trapped in its shaded face. A young boy sits nearby, adjusting the angle of a cloth hung between two poles. The cloth acts as a wind sail, catching breezes and directing them toward the sleeping mats arranged neatly along the floor. His careful attention makes you smile. Looking over the rooftops, you see patterns repeated again and again. Shade where it's needed, openings where the wind moves, materials that hold coolness, shapes that guide air rather than block it. The entire village is like a living organism adapted to breathe with the desert, exhaling heat, inhaling night. A final gust sweeps across the rooftops, carrying with it the scent of river water, dust, and faint perfume from the households below. You breathe deeply, feeling the coolness sink into your chest. Then you step toward the ladder, ready to climb down into the next chapter of the ancient night. where comfort is found not in escape from the environment, but in harmony with it. You climb down from the elevated home and drift into another stretch of winding lanes. The night has deepened into a thick, velvety quiet. Yet, in the distance, you hear soft footsteps, laughter, and the clinking of pottery. You follow the sounds until the houses fall away again, and a cluster of flat rooftops rises before you, glowing softly under the moon. These roofs look connected, almost like an extended open terrace that belongs to the whole neighborhood rather than any single household. You step onto the nearest rooftop and immediately feel it. The air here moves with a different rhythm. Cooler, freer. You walk farther in, and the space opens up into a wide, shared area where several families have gathered. Woven mats lie side by side. Lanterns glow at the edges, and groups of neighbors sit in circles, talking in gentle voices. You realize you have entered one of the community rooftop spaces that form the heartbeat of nighttime life. One well-documented observation in social studies is that Egyptians used rooftops as communal areas as often as private ones. These elevated surfaces became meeting places, story corners, play areas, and sleeping quarters. The heat that smothered the village during the day becomes, up here, merely a polite guest at night. A group of children runs past you, chasing each other with soft giggles. Their feet patter against the plastered roof, raising tiny clouds of powdery dust. They weave between clusters of adults, their game never disturbing the tranquil mood. You catch the faint smell of a clay brazier filled with herbs someone has burned earlier. The warmth from the embers drifts past you, carrying a hint of cedar and something spicy. A cluster of women sits on a woven blanket not far from you. They pass around a small clay pot filled with steeped hibiscus petals. The drink glows ruby red in the lamplight. One woman gestures for you to join them. When she hands you the pot, you take a cautious sip. The liquid is tart, slightly sweet, and pleasantly cool. A few researchers note that chilled infusions were sometimes prepared to soothe the mouth and throat during warm nights. Whether or not the hibiscus is meant for cooling, it softens the heat lingering in your chest. A breeze drifts across the rooftop, ruffling linen curtains that hang between wooden poles. The curtains sway and ripple like pale waves, catching and spreading the wind to the people gathered beneath them. A lesser-known interpretation in environmental studies suggests that households coordinated the placement of rooftop drapes to maximize airflow through multiple homes at once, creating mini wind pathways that served clusters of families rather than only one. Watching the curtains move now, you can easily imagine such collaboration happening naturally. A young man nearby adjusts one of the drapes, tying it a little higher to catch a fresher breeze. His mother claps her hands in approval, laughing softly. You smile, sensing a ritual repeated countless times during long summers. The rooftop feels alive with the hum of shared adaptation. You wander farther and come upon a circle of elders seated on low stools. They speak slowly, their voices blending with the wind. One man holds a clay cup filled with an aromatic drink. He lifts it toward the breeze as if offering a quiet toast to the night. Then he begins telling a story. Though you understand only fragments, the cadence alone is soothing. Something about a voyage along the eastern desert route, a stubborn camel, and a sandstorm that nearly swallowed a caravan whole. The others laugh warmly, shaking their heads with knowing amusement. Old stories, it seems, flow best when carried by the evening wind. You sit near them for a moment, listening. Their voices rise and fall like the pulse of the night, steady and unhurried. Then a cooler gust sweeps through the rooftop, strong enough to make one woman wrap her shawl tighter. She laughs in surprise. An elder points toward the stars, predicting the direction of the wind for the rest of the night. People often learn to read the night sky for clues about temperature shifts, and this elder seems to hold decades of that accumulated knowledge. Nearby, a small group of teenagers sits in a semicircle, each holding a reed flute or hand drum. They tap out a gentle rhythm, creating a soft, playful melody that glides across the rooftop like drifting sand. One girl plays a slow tune while another adds a light drum beat that sounds almost like footsteps echoing in a distant corridor. The music blends with lantern glow and moonlight, weaving the moment into something dreamlike. On another side of the rooftop, families prepare their sleeping spots. Mats are unrolled, linen sheets smoothed, small wooden pillows arranged just so. A mother dusts off a section of the rooftop and spreads a thin cloth over it. She sprinkles a few drops of water across the cloth so the breeze can cool it further. A little girl watches with wide eyes, mimicking the motions with her small hands. Traditions pass easily at night, carried gently from parent to child. A man lifts a large, shallow basin toward the sky. At first you think he is offering something to the moon, but then you see what he is doing. He holds the basin so it catches as much breeze as possible, then sets it on the ground where it can help cool the area around the mats. The technique is simple but effective. Some specialists in ancient climate strategies propose that wide containers of water or cool objects placed strategically around sleeping areas helped create small pockets of lower temperature. Whether learned through trial or past knowledge, the idea seems to work effortlessly here. You wander toward the far side of the roof where a group of neighbors sits in a larger circle. One woman cradles a baby whose tiny fists wave sleepily at the air. She hums a soft tune that drifts across the rooftop. The child's eyes flutter closed as the breeze brushes its hair. The woman rocks gently, letting the night help lull the baby to sleep. You feel a warm tenderness in the moment, seeing how ancient families leaned on each other and the wind itself to soothe and settle their little ones. One corner of the rooftop holds a clay trough filled with cool sand brought earlier from a shaded place. A few people dip their feet into it, sighing with relief as the sand draws warmth away from their skin. A concept still discussed among environmental researchers is that sand, depending on its depth and shade exposure, holds temperature layers that can cool the body when touched. Watching the villagers sink their toes into the trough, you see how simply and naturally such knowledge turns into nightly practice. A faint chorus of crickets rises, blending with the murmurs of conversation. The rooftop glows with lantern light as people finish their preparations. Soon the chatter quiets, replaced by the gentle rustle of bodies settling into their mats. A father stretches out beside his son, adjusting a linen sheet to catch the wind. A group of women nestles together under a wide cloth hung between two poles. Children nestle against their parents. The wind shifts again, brushing across the open space like a wandering spirit. You lie down on a spare mat someone motions for you to use. The surface is firm but comfortable, the weave allowing the air to move underneath. You rest your head on a small wooden support and look up. The stars are impossibly bright, thousands of tiny fires scattered across the sky. The moon hangs low, casting silver over the rooftops. From here, the village looks like a network of floating islands in a sea of shadow. You hear whispers, laughter fading, an occasional cough, the rustle of linen. Above you, a curtain flutters lightly. The wind cools your face. The rooftop becomes a gentle cradle lifted between earth and sky. You remain there a moment more before rising again, ready to follow the night as it guides you toward the next quiet discovery waiting among the ancient walls. You rise slowly from the rooftop mat, brushing the last traces of cool air from your skin. The village has grown quieter still, drifting toward that deep hour of night when most tasks are finished, most conversations have softened, and the world feels suspended in gentle breath. You make your way down a short staircase into a narrow lane, letting your feet follow the faint echoes of distant movement. Somewhere ahead, you hear the rhythmic thud of something heavy being set down, followed by quiet voices murmuring with familiar fatigue. You turn a corner and find a group of workers gathered near a low courtyard. Some sit, some stand, some stretch their arms slowly, as though easing out the stiffness of a long day. They wear expressions that mix exhaustion with calm recognition. This, you realize, is a moment repeated throughout Egyptian life, the transition from labor to rest, when the heat finally releases its hold and the body remembers its own weight. You step closer, unnoticed for a moment, observing how each person settles into the coolness of the night. A point frequently echoed in studies of ancient labor patterns is that Egyptians often adapted their working hours around the sun. Heavy tasks began early at dawn, paused during the brutal midday hours, then resumed briefly before sunset. The night, therefore, became essential not just for sleep, but for recovery, socializing, and resetting the rhythms of the body. The workers before you embody this balance perfectly, stretching out sore muscles as the desert breezes smooth the heat away. You watch as a man leans against a mud brick wall, his chest rising and falling in long, steady breaths. He wipes his brow with a strip of linen and glances upward, as if surprised by the gentle wind brushing his face. A young woman sits nearby grinding grain in a small quern, not for work but for the evening meal. Even though the hour is late, her motions remain methodical. She pauses only to fan herself with a reed mat, inviting the moving air across her shoulders. Near the center of the courtyard stands a simple wooden rack hung with wet cloths. A woman dips cloths into a shallow bowl of cool water and drapes them across the top rail. The air passing through the courtyard catches on the damp cloth, creating a cool draft. A little boy runs beneath the cloths repeatedly, laughing as the moisture cools his hair. Observers of everyday life often note that such simple cooling tricks became nightly rituals, particularly in homes where people returned from heavy labor. You step farther in and see a group of men rolling large woven baskets toward a shaded alcove. Their movements are slow but deliberate. They speak softly as they work, perhaps discussing tomorrow's tasks or the state of the fields near the river. After placing the baskets in the alcove, one man sits on a low stool and massages his calves with oil scented faintly of juniper. A lesser-cited detail from ancient medical papyri mentions mixtures like this being used to ease muscle tension and promote rest after strenuous work. Watching him fold his fingers firmly into the sore muscles of his legs, you sense the relief. Another worker sits with her back against a raised platform, shifting the weight of her body until she finds a cooler spot along the wall. She closes her eyes and lets the breeze slip through the courtyard. The wall has released most of its stored heat by now, leaving smooth patches of cool clay. She tilts her head back, resting against one such patch, and exhales with a long, grateful note. These moments of finding coolness in familiar corners reveal just how deeply people learn to read their environment. You follow a narrow corridor leading away from the courtyard and stumble upon a workshop where late-night weaving continues. A young man sits before a simple loom, his hands moving steadily as he works to complete a cloth ordered earlier that day. Though tired, he appears calm. The loom sits beneath an open window, angled perfectly to catch the breeze. Each time the wind slips through, the threads quiver. He pauses to let the coolness wash across his face before continuing. Some researchers mention that nighttime work, particularly fine textile weaving, was common for those who preferred to avoid daytime heat or needed uninterrupted quiet. Beside him, an older woman smooths a large mat across the floor. She pats it down, testing the surface, then sprinkles tiny droplets of water across its edge. When she sits down, she positions herself so that any breeze entering the room will first cross the dampened mat, cooling the airflow as it reaches her. The subtlety of this setup amazes you. Even the placement of mats can shape the comfort of the night. From the workshop, you step back outside and notice a long shadow sweeping across the path. A man carrying a heavy jar walks past, balancing its weight across his shoulder. The jar contains water drawn earlier from a shaded pool. He heads toward a small household where he sets the jar near the doorway. The family inside greets him with quiet warmth. They unstopper the jar and refill several cups, passing them around. You drink from one offered to you, feeling the water cool your throat. Though only slightly cooler than the night air, it feels restorative. A gentle melody draws your ear. In another courtyard, a group of workers sits together softly singing. The tune is slow, meant for winding down the mind. They sway slightly, tapping hands against their knees to keep rhythm. These songs often appear in notations carved on ostraca and occasionally in papyrus fragments. Some scholars believe the melodies helped synchronize tasks during work, while others think they served as a balm after long hours of labor. Listening to the low harmonies now, you feel the song calming your own breath. Across from them, a woman kneels beside her husband, rubbing oil into his shoulders while he leans forward, bracing himself on his hands. She works in soft circles, focusing on tight spots. He exhales sharply when she releases a knot of tension. In the dim light, the oil glistens across his skin. Families often helped one another prepare for rest, using touch and simple remedies to ease the body after a punishing day in the sun. You continue wandering and find a small alcove where two carpenters sit sharpening their chisels. They work slowly, not preparing for immediate tasks, but maintaining their tools in the cooler air. One of them glances at you and taps the edge of a stone, showing how heat dulls metal faster. Working at night, when sweat evaporates and the air is calm, makes tool care easier. The coolness helps them concentrate and reduces strain on their hands. Farther down the lane, a woman sweeps sand toward the edges of her courtyard. The sweeping is slow, rhythmic, like a meditative act. She lifts the broom occasionally to stretch her back. When she finishes, she sits on the step and dips her hands into a bowl of water. She rubs a squeeze of scented oil between her palms, lifting her hands to her face as the aroma opens her breath. These gestures feel like signals to the body. The day is ending. Rest begins now. You step closer to another home where a family gathers around a low table, not for food but for planning. They discuss tomorrow's tasks. Who will work in the fields? Who will fetch water? Who will tend the animals? Their tone is calm, almost sleepy. A teacher of ancient domestic rhythms once wrote that nightly planning helped families feel grounded and prepared, especially during the hottest seasons. Watching them now, you recognize how essential such quiet rituals must have been. As you leave the area, a faint breeze sweeps down the lane, brushing against your arms, carrying the scent of oil, sweat, earth, and the faint sweetness of flowers lingering from earlier workshops. You pause, closing your eyes, letting the air glide across your skin. The coolness calms the mind, eases the muscles, and carries you with it into the next turn of the village. You take a breath, the night growing deeper around you. Families wind down, laborers soften into rest. Each step you take follows the unseen rhythm of thousands of years of work days, ending under the same moon, the same stars, the same patient breeze guiding tired bodies towards sleep. You move away from the quiet courtyard where the workers rest and follow a narrow footpath that winds uphill toward a darker silhouette rising against the moonlit desert. At first, you think it might be a formation of natural rock, but as you draw closer, the shapes sharpen into deliberate lines and carved openings. The air grows cooler with each step, slipping along your skin in thin streams. Soon you realize you have reached one of the cliffside dwellings where some Egyptians made their homes against the limestone hills that frame the Nile Valley. The ground beneath you changes texture, becoming firmer and smoother as you approach the stone face. You touch the rock and feel its lingering coolness. The cliffs, shielded from hours of direct sunlight by their own mass, create a natural reservoir of lower temperatures. Entire communities sometimes formed near these slopes, taking advantage of their protective embrace. A commonly accepted insight among archaeologists is that cliffside homes enjoyed naturally moderated temperatures, warmer in winter and cooler in summer. Standing here, your hand pressed against the stone, you sense the truth of that clever choice. You spot a narrow doorway carved directly into the rock. A small oil lamp flickers inside, casting a golden halo around the entrance. You duck in and find yourself standing in a cool interior chamber carved with simple strokes. The walls are smooth, shaped by human hands. A woman sits inside grinding barley, the steady scrape of stone against grain echoing softly. She looks up at you, smiles, and motions for you to sit. You lower yourself onto a woven mat and immediately feel the difference beneath you. The floor is cool, almost chilled, storing the night's quiet breath. She gestures toward the walls, explaining with subtle motions how the stone helps regulate the temperature. You run your palm along the surface. It feels like the inside of a cave, somehow simultaneously grounding and comforting. A boy runs past you, laughing softly as he carries a clay jug. He sets it in a hollow, carved into the wall, a carved niche that acts almost like a natural cooling shelf. A detail noted in some household excavations suggests that families often used rock alcoves to store perishables, since the temperature remained lower there than in open air. You follow the boy deeper into the dwelling. The carved corridor opens into a second chamber, illuminated by a steady flame. Two men sit repairing fishing nets, their voices murmuring in calm tones. The nets rest beside a small pile of river reeds. One man drapes the half-mended net across a low rock shelf to check its length. The breeze circulating through the corridor cools the fibers as they work. He gestures at the air and speaks of how wind flows differently along stone compared to open sand. Observers of ancient daily life sometimes note that people living near cliffs became skilled at reading air patterns, using shadows and dust trails to predict cooling currents. You continue walking and reach a ledge where the dwelling opens directly onto a steep drop. A simple railing made of bound branches guards the edge. From here, the entire village below looks like a quiet constellation of lanterns drifting across the desert floor. You lean forward slightly and the wind rolls upward from the valley, brushing your face with surprising coolness. The cliffs channel the breeze in steady upward drafts, creating natural ventilation for the people who live here. Several environmental studies mention this phenomenon, describing how the upward flowing air acted like a night-long gift for the households carved into the stone. As you stand there, feeling the wind dance across your skin, a young girl places a dampened cloth over the railing to let the air cool it further. After a moment, she drapes the cloth over her shoulders and sighs in relief. It seems such a simple trick, yet the effect is immediate. She laughs softly, motioning as though to say the breeze here is stronger than anywhere else in the village. You believe her instantly. She leads you a few steps deeper, showing you an opening carved high in the wall. It acts as a vent, further drawing in cool air and allowing warm air to escape upward. A number of researchers still discuss how intentional such designs were, or whether they developed gradually as families recognized which shapes brought comfort. Standing here, you suspect the truth lies in a blend of intuition and experience. When you live inside stone, you learn quickly how to let it breathe. In a corner of the chamber, an older woman sits cutting strips of cloth. She dips each strip into a bowl of water mixed with herbs, then hangs them from a rock protrusion overhead. The moving air dries them slowly, releasing a delicate fragrance into the room. The scent drifts in soft waves, giving the chamber a cool, earthy calm. According to some interpretations of domestic practice, scents may have helped people ease into sleep in spaces with little decoration. Here, the gentle aroma feels like a lullaby, whispered by the rock itself. Another family member enters the dwelling carrying a small basket of dates and bread. They place the basket on a flat stone shelf carved high enough to stay away from pests and low enough to remain cool. You notice several clay jars aligned neatly along the opposite wall. Each one rests inside a carved hollow, holding water, oil, or grain. The pairing of clay and stone seems almost like a conversation between elements, each helping cool and protect the contents inside. The air shifts again, curling gently around your shoulders. You move toward the small exit that leads back outside. The ledge glows in the moonlight. A few neighbors gather there now, sitting on blankets, talking about the day. Their voices have the calm rhythm of people who trust the night to take care of them. A child lies on his stomach, staring at the stars, swinging his feet absent-mindedly over the edge. The breeze lifts his hair, making it flutter like a tiny flag. You sit beside the family and take in the sight. Below, the village flickers. Above, the sky stretches clear and ancient. The stone against your back feels cool, almost tender. One of the elders seated on the ledge points toward the horizon and murmurs something about tomorrow's wind. His tone carries the authority of experience, shaped by nights spent in this elevated home. As the conversation winds down, the family begins preparing their sleeping spots. They spread mats directly onto the stone floor, relying on its stored coolness. Some lay thin linen sheets, others use only the stone and the night breeze. A young woman dips her hands into a bowl of water and pats her face and arms lightly before lying down. The water evaporates quickly, leaving her refreshed. You watch as lanterns dim one by one, people settle into quiet breathing. The cliffs cradle them gently, the stone walls holding the coolness like a memory they refuse to let go of. Even the faint sounds from the village below seem softened, filtered by the layers of air rising along the rock face. You stand, giving the family a final nod before stepping back onto the path. The cool stone under your feet lingers even as you descend toward the warmer lanes below. You realize that this cliffside dwelling has shown you something important. That comfort in ancient Egypt was often found not in resisting the heat, but in embracing the materials and landforms the desert offered freely. As you walk onward, the breeze touches your back like a soft farewell, guiding you toward the next hidden wisdom the night has yet to reveal. You leave the cliffside dwelling behind, stepping back into the open desert where the moon pools light across dunes and hard-packed earth. The air feels wider here, untouched by walls or courtyards. It moves differently too, slipping along your skin in long, wandering currents. You follow a faint path worn into the sand until the distant glow of small fires emerges along the horizon. Their flickering lights rise and fall like quiet stars resting on the ground. Curious, you approach them. As you draw closer, you begin to see the outlines of tents rising from the dunes. Their shapes are simple, stretched low and wide, anchored by ropes and stones. They belong to a group of desert nomads pausing for the night. Even before you reach the camp, the breeze shifts again, carrying with it the scent of warm wool, spices, and smoke. A man standing near the edge of the camp lifts a hand in greeting. His posture is relaxed, his clothes loose and flowing, designed to protect his skin by day and release heat by night. You notice immediately how comfortably he stands in the open air, as though the temperature does not trouble him at all. Many anthropological studies highlight the nomad's intimate understanding of desert cooling, born from generations of observation and adaptation. Watching this man, you can sense the depth of that familiarity. He gestures for you to follow him into the camp. You step across the sand, noticing how the tents are positioned. Each one faces the direction of the evening winds, angled so that the breeze funnels straight through the open flaps and out the opposite end. The arrangement looks effortless, yet the effect is striking. Even from outside, You can feel the airflow weaving through the camp, smoothing the night's warmth into something bearable. A woman sits beside one of the tents, weaving a mat from coarse plant fibers. She dips the fibers into a small bowl of water before working them into place. The moist strands release a faint coolness as she bends and ties them. She offers you a smile, then lifts the mat to show how its open weave allows air to pass freely beneath the sleeper. A detail often noted by field researchers traveling with nomadic groups is that their bedding is intentionally airy, designed to lift the body away from the heated sand. Across from her, a group of children plays with a simple ball made from bundled cloth. They run across the sand barefoot, stopping occasionally to plunge their feet into a shallow pit of cooler earth. One boy motions for you to try it. When you place your foot inside, you feel the hidden coolness nestled just beneath the surface layer of warm sand. Some desert communities take advantage of this natural temperature layering, using shaded or dug spaces to create cooler resting spots at night. You continue into the camp, passing a low tent where several people sit together sharing a meal. They dip dried bread into a bowl of lentils and roasted herbs, eating slowly and talking in soft tones. The tent's entrance flaps sway with each breeze, guiding air through the shaded interior. A woman lifts a linen cloth and hangs it across one opening, dampening it lightly with water. The breeze passing through the cloth turns noticeably cooler. She laughs when you react to the sudden chill, and she shows you a small jug of water she keeps solely for refreshing the cloth during hot evenings. Inside another tent, a man reclines on cushions stuffed with soft desert grass. He gestures for you to enter. When you kneel, you feel the faint coolness beneath the cushions. He lifts one edge, revealing a layer of woven reeds placed over the sand. These reeds act as a buffer, preventing the day's trapped heat from reaching the sleeper. A few specialists who have lived among nomads describe similar setups, explaining how natural materials help moderate temperature better than heavy fabrics. The man reaches for a leather pouch and offers it to you. Inside is a mixture of crushed herbs used to freshen the body and mind. He rubs some on his wrists, then motions for you to do the same. The scent rises gently, cool and crisp, clearing your senses. He leans back, eyes half closed, letting the breeze carry the fragrance across his skin. The simplicity of the moment reminds you that cooling is often found not in objects, but in sensation, in the little rituals that reconnect the body with its environment. As you leave the tent, you notice a cluster of animals resting nearby. Several goats lie in the sand, their bodies turned to face the wind. A camel sits with its long neck stretched toward the breeze, eyelids drooping in contentment. The nomads seem to have arranged their sleeping area alongside their animals, not separating the two worlds. They observe how the creatures position themselves, how they seek airflow, how they choose the coolest patches of sand. A number of desert studies point out that nomads often take cues from their animals, whose instincts for comfort in extreme heat are finely tuned. A young woman sits by the fire, grinding something in a small stone bowl. When she sees your curiosity, she offers the bowl for you to smell. The mixture contains crushed leaves and seeds known for their cooling fragrance. She sprinkles the blend into a clay dish, then places it inside the tent where its aroma gently spreads. According to oral traditions still preserved among modern desert people, certain scents calm the body enough to help it release heat more effectively. You breathe it in, feeling the cool undertone ripple through you. The fire crackles softly, radiating warmth that contrasts with the wind's coolness. A man flips a small clay pot near the edge of the flames, heating water for tea. When he pours it, steam curls upward in thin ribbons. You accept a cup when offered. The tea is warm, yet it seems to soothe rather than heat you. Some scholars note that drinking warm liquids in the desert encourages the body to balance its internal temperature more easily. It feels counterintuitive at first, but here, under the stars, the idea makes surprising sense. As you sip the tea, you look around the camp. The tents flutter like gentle wings. The people settle onto their mats, moving slowly into their nightly routines. Some lie on their backs, hands folded across their stomachs, eyes turned toward the stars. Others sit cross-legged, braiding cloth or whispering the last conversations of the evening. The air moves constantly, shaped by the open desert and guided by the clever positioning of the tents. A young boy paddles through the sand toward you, carrying a small wooden pallet. He sets it beside one of the tents, then pats it proudly. He taps the pallet's slats, showing how they lift the sleeper just enough to let airflow pass beneath. This small innovation reflects an understanding formed not from architecture, but from living in open lands where the earth's breath carries the promise of nighttime comfort. As the camp quiets, the wind grows stronger, sweeping across the dunes with long, slow strokes. The tents tremble softly, answering the breeze like a collective sigh. You stand on the edge of the camp and look outward. The desert stretches endlessly, shimmering under moonlight, alive with movement and stillness at once. You breathe in deeply, letting the cool air fill your lungs. Nomads have learned countless ways to live with heat, not conquer it. They move when the desert allows, rest when the wind returns, and sleep beneath open skies that offer more comfort than any enclosed room could provide. When you finally step away from the camp, the breeze follows you, as if guiding your path back toward the village. You walk on, carrying the wisdom of the desert wanderers with every step. You make your way back toward the heart of the village, leaving behind the open desert camp with its quiet strength and drifting campfire smoke. As you approach the clustered homes once more, the lanes widen slightly, the walls grow taller, and the faint glow of finer oil lamps begins to shimmer through carved windows. A different rhythm fills the air here. Softer footsteps, quieter voices, an unhurried confidence. You have entered the quarter where the wealthier families live, those whose resources allow for a few additional comforts on nights when the heat presses down like a heavy blanket. The first home you pass is surrounded by a low wall adorned with smooth tiles. The gate stands open, revealing a courtyard lit by several tall lamps. You step inside, guided by a servant who nods in greeting. Immediately, you sense the difference. The air feels cooler, shaped not only by clever design but by resources that let the residents cultivate extra layers of comfort. A well-accepted observation among historians is that elite households in ancient Egypt often adapted the same heat survival methods as common families, but with finer materials and more elaborate construction. In this courtyard, those familiar ideas appear again, yet transformed, refined into something elegant. Your eyes fall first on a shallow reflecting pool in the center of the courtyard. It glows softly under the moonlight, its surface perfectly still. A young woman dips a ceramic ladle into the water, then sprinkles droplets across the tiled floor. The moisture evaporates slowly, releasing cool air that gathers beneath the shade of a linen canopy stretched across the courtyard. You feel the coolness brush your ankles and drift upward in faint, refreshing curls. A servant nearby carries a tray of linen cloths folded neatly. Unlike the simple woven cloths you saw earlier, these are smooth, bleached to a pale ivory, and embroidered with delicate geometric patterns. A lesser-noticed detail in textile studies suggests that the wealthy often used finer linen, not only for its beauty, but because its thin weave cooled the skin much faster than coarse fabric. One cloth is placed into your hands. It feels light as morning mist, almost cool even before any breeze touches it. As you wander deeper, you notice tall ceramic jars positioned throughout the courtyard. Their surfaces are decorated with lotus petals and falcon motifs. Each jar is partially sunk into the ground, where the earth remains cooler. A servant pours water into one jar, allowing it to seep slowly through the porous clay. A faint mist rises from its surface. The technique is the same as you've seen before, but here the jars are larger, the placement more strategic, maximizing the cooling effect in the spacious yard. You follow a corridor into the house, passing beautifully polished wooden doors that lead into a grand hall. Carved columns support the ceiling, painted with images of birds in flight. The air inside feels astonishingly cool compared to the desert outside. A subtle airflow brushes your hair. You look up and notice a lattice of vents placed high along the walls. These openings guide wind from shaded courtyards into the rooms, creating a steady indoor breeze. A middle-aged man wearing fine linen gestures you toward a sitting area. Cushions made of dyed fabrics are arranged in circles around a low wooden table. On the table lie several alabaster jars filled with scented oils. He uncorks one and lets you inhale the fragrance. It carries notes of sweet myrrh, lotus, and something crisp that reminds you of river reeds. He shows you how the oils are applied lightly to the skin. The scent refreshes the senses and, with the breeze drifting through the hall, creates a gentle illusion of coolness. Some research into ancient perfumery suggests that certain fragrances were preferred specifically at night because they cleared the mind and softened the perception of heat. Across the hall, several servants prepare sleeping areas for the household. Instead of simple mats, the elite rest upon raised wooden frames, fitted with tightly woven cords. These beds lift the body well above the floor, allowing air to circulate beneath. The cords are wrapped with linen strips that have been slightly moistened. When the wind passes through the room, the beds become small islands of comfort. You press your hand against one cord. It feels tender but firm, absorbing the wind in a soothing rhythm. A detail noted in excavations of elite homes shows that some bed frames included carved openings along their sides, specifically designed to enhance ventilation. Here, you see one such frame. The carvings, shaped like papyrus stalks, allow airflow even when blankets or cloths hang over the sides. You follow your host to another room, where a pair of women recline on soft cushions, while servants fan them with feathered fans. These fans are ornate, crafted from ostrich plumes, dyed in soft shades of green and gold. The servants move them slowly, not only to cool the women but to spread the delicate scent of incense burning nearby. The smoke drifts in thin lines from a carved bronze burner. As you inhale, the aroma reaches you, a blend of cedar resin and dried citrus peel. According to some interpretations of household practices, incense in elite homes often served a dual purpose. It refreshed the air and acted as a marker of status. You are led through a long hallway where the walls shimmer with faint frescoes of garden scenes. The images show fruit trees, ponds, lotus flowers, and people resting in shaded groves. You sense that the inhabitants of this home draw inspiration from these gardens, creating small pockets of coolness wherever they can. The entire house feels like an imitation of a carefully tended oasis. You step into a secondary courtyard, smaller than the first, but lush. Potted plants line the perimeter, their leaves trembling as wind flows through the open archways. A narrow water channel runs along one wall, fed by a hidden reservoir. The water moves slowly, creating a soft, burbling sound. A young servant kneels beside the channel and dips a piece of linen into the flow. She drapes it over her shoulders, sighing with relief. You sense that even in this refined household, the simplest cooling tricks remain the most treasured. You move to another corner, where a small alcove holds jars of scented water used for refreshing linens. One jar contains a mixture of lotus, mint, and barley. Another holds a solution made from crushed myrtle leaves. The scent rising from them feels fresh, almost invigorating. Some modern analysts note that the elite relied heavily on scented water to cool both the air and the mind. A servant gently sprinkles a few drops onto a draped cloth. The fragrance scatters through the courtyard, lightening the atmosphere. A man steps out from a nearby chamber holding a jar carved from translucent alabaster. He offers it to you. Inside is a blend of oil infused with desert herbs known for their soothing qualities. He explains with a gesture that this oil is used before sleep to ease tension and encourage coolness. He rubs a small amount over his wrists and temples, then leans into the breeze with closed eyes. You follow his example. The oil feels smooth, and the scent seems to dissolve any lingering heat from your skin. The night grows deeper, and the household begins to settle. Lamps dim. The breeze continues to drift through elegant halls. Servants finish their tasks, securing jars, folding cloths, and smoothing the sleeping cushions. You watch as the wealthier family members head toward their chosen resting places, each bed arranged purposefully to catch the wind from a particular direction. You stand for a moment in the doorway of the courtyard, feeling the combination of cool stone, drifting scents, and gentle airflow. Even though these people have more resources than many others in the village, the techniques they rely on echo the same old wisdom: water, shade, elevation, scent, and air. The basics never change. What changes is the way people shape them. You leave quietly, stepping back into the warmer night outside the walls. The elite household fades behind you, its lamps glowing softly like stars trapped in clay. Ahead, the village hums with quieter tones. You walk on, carrying the scent of lotus and desert herbs in your hair. A new corner of the night awaits, ready to show how the youngest among them found sleep in this world of heat. You leave the quiet elegance of the elite quarter behind and slip once more into the simpler lanes of the village. The night has grown softer now, its heat easing into a slow, steady warmth that feels almost affectionate. You follow a faint trail of laughter, high-pitched and bright, drifting through the shadows like fireflies. As you turn a corner, you come upon a small courtyard filled with the gentle chaos of children preparing for bed. A mother sits on a woven mat with her daughter curled in her lap. She combs the child's hair with slow strokes, spreading a tiny amount of scented oil through the strands. The girl hums sleepily, leaning into her mother's hands. A widely acknowledged insight among historians is that children in ancient Egypt followed bedtime routines similar to adults, but gentler, simpler, and filled with rituals meant to comfort the body against the relentless heat of the day. You approach the courtyard, and a father beckons for you to enter. He sits with two young boys who are fanning themselves with small reed fans. The boys wave the fans enthusiastically, pretending they're controlling the wind like little sorcerers. Their father laughs and joins them, sweeping his own fan through the air in exaggerated motions. Even in the warm night, their playfulness adds a lightness to the scene. Nearby, a grandmother lays out a series of small sleeping mats. She smooths each one with tender hands, checking for stray pebbles or sand. She pats one spot and smiles, satisfied. She then sprinkles a tiny amount of cool water across the surface so the breeze will cool it further. A lesser discussed detail found in certain household notes is that families often customized each child's sleeping area based on their temperament. Some preferred the rooftop under open sky, others felt safer in shaded courtyards, and some slept best with familiar scents nearby. A boy trots into the courtyard, carrying a bundle of herbs tied with a simple cord. He hands it proudly to his grandmother, who places it near one of the younger children's mats. The herbs smell like basil and something sweet. The bundle releases a fragrance that helps calm the mind and may discourage insects. Observers of daily Egyptian life sometimes write that such scented bundles provided reassurance for children who were restless in the heat or fearful of the dark. You walk toward a family seated near a low wall. A mother is dipping her fingers into a small bowl of cool water and pressing them onto her toddler's cheeks, neck, and wrists. The child giggles and reaches for the bowl, splashing their own fingers into it. Evaporating water cools the skin quickly, especially in the dry night air. This simple motion becomes a loving ritual, repeated nightly until the little one begins to anticipate the gentle touch. A cluster of older children sits together along the shaded side of the courtyard. They whisper stories to one another, reenacting scenes they've heard from adults or teachers. One child holds a clay toy shaped like a lion, its surface smoothed by years of handling. Scholars often note that toys were more than amusements. They were anchors of comfort during restless evenings. The children press the toys to their cheeks, letting the cool clay steady their thoughts. A mother nearby hums softly while folding a linen sheet. Her voice rises and falls in a soothing melody. She spreads the sheet across her daughter's mat, lifting one corner so the breeze slides underneath. The little girl lies down immediately, sighing contentedly. The light linen flutters once, then settles across her in a tender wave. Bedtime songs and rhythmic humming appear often in artistic depictions of Egyptian homes, suggesting that sound itself played a role in easing children into sleep during warm nights. You notice a father adjusting a small canopy made from reeds and thin cloth. He positions it so it shields his son from drifting dust while still allowing air to pass through. The canopy casts a soft shadow, making the space feel smaller, cozier. Some researchers studying children's lives in ancient Egypt suggest that shaded enclosures helped mimic the coolness of womb-like spaces, providing emotional comfort when temperatures were high. In one corner, a toddler sits on her mother's lap, clutching a worn piece of linen. The mother taps the cloth lightly, releasing a scent of chamomile and mint. She presses it against the toddler's chest and rocks gently. Whether the child understands why the scent is calming hardly matters. Instinct does the rest. You move closer to another family arranging mats along a rooftop ladder. They are preparing to climb up for the night. The youngest hesitates at the first rung, clinging to his sister's hand. She reassures him with a small gesture, pointing upward at the sky. She explains that the stars are cooler than the ground. She taps his nose, and he laughs, letting go of his fear. Some modern scholars still debate whether bedtime explanations like these were rooted in scientific understanding or comforting metaphor. Watching this family, the distinction feels unimportant. What matters is the bond formed in the shared ritual. You follow them up the ladder to the rooftop. Once there, you see several families already settling in. Children curl beside their parents, wrapped loosely in thin linen sheets. A warm breeze sweeps across the rooftop, stirring hair and fabric. You spot one child lying on her back, counting stars with slow, sleepy motions of her fingers. She whispers names to each one, perhaps invented, perhaps passed down by older siblings. Rooftop sleeping offered children both relief from the heat and a celestial playground to drift into dreams. On the far side of the roof, a father sprinkles a small scoop of cool sand across his children's mats. He smooths it gently, then shakes the mat so only the finest grains remain. The children run their hands across it, marveling at its smoothness. Some ethnographers note that cooled sand was occasionally used as a tactile comfort for children, soothing them through the long, warm nights. You sit near a family lighting a tiny, low lamp shielded by a pottery ring. The flame is soft and steady, meant not to warm the air but to keep the children from waking in complete darkness. A mother tells a short bedtime tale about a crocodile who forgets how to swim and must learn to float on moonbeams. The children giggle sleepily, pressing closer to her. All around you, the rooftop turns into a constellation of little sleeping nests. Parents whisper final words of reassurance, smoothing hair, adjusting linens, brushing sand from tiny feet. A gentle murmur rises like a lullaby woven from dozens of voices. One last breeze sweeps across the rooftop, carrying with it the scents of herbs, clay, and the river. You watch as eyelids flutter closed, tiny chests rise and fall, and restless bodies go still. The night folds around them like a soft, warm cocoon. As you step quietly away from the rooftop, you realize you have witnessed something universal. No matter the era, or the heat, or the desert's demands, bedtime for children remains a ritual of tenderness, comfort, and whispered safety. And in this ancient world, the night wind becomes a loving guardian, easing little dreams into motion beneath the stars. You descend slowly from the rooftop where the children have drifted into sleep, returning to the lanes wrapped in deep, settled quiet. The night has reached that still hour when even the warm air seems to pause and listen. You follow a faint glow ahead, noticing a cluster of white-robed figures moving in and out of a large rectangular building. Their footsteps are soft, measured, and purposeful. As you draw closer, the scent of incense begins to seep into the air, mingling with the desert breeze. You have reached the dwelling of priests, a place where night rituals weave themselves gently into the fabric of sleep. You step into a shaded forecourt and feel an immediate shift in the atmosphere. The coolness here is more pronounced, shaped not only by stone and shadow but by intention. A widely referenced observation in studies of temple communities is that priests lived in spaces built to preserve calm. The rooms were arranged to catch the quietest breezes, store the deepest coolness, and provide refuge from the day's burning sun. Standing here, the truth settles around you like a soft cloak. A young priest carrying a clay bowl nods in greeting. The bowl contains water mixed with herbs crushed into a faint green tint. He pours a little onto the ground outside the entrance, letting it soak into the packed earth. When the breeze passes over it, you feel the subtle coolness rising, spreading like a whispered blessing. He explains through gestures that this practice purifies the walkway before the evening recitations. Yet the cooling effect is unmistakable, another small addition to the night's comfort. Inside the priestly residence, the rooms are dim and peaceful. Oil lamps glow behind carved niches, casting soft halos along the smooth walls. You follow the sound of chanting until you reach a chamber where several priests sit cross-legged on woven mats. Their voices move in steady waves, carrying ancient words meant to filter the day's chaos from the mind. Some researchers who study religious daily routines note that these evening chants were as much for mental clarity as devotion. The vibrations of their voices warm the air, yet the cool stone floor beneath them balances it perfectly. A senior priest raises a hand to invite you in. You sit quietly near one of the pillars. The air here is remarkably fresh. A small opening high in the wall guides wind into the chamber, funneling it downward. The breeze catches the incense smoke, twirling it into elegant spirals before allowing it to drift toward a carved exit vent. You watch the air move as though it has been trained. Some historians still discuss whether such airflow systems were intentional engineering or the result of long practice with stonework. Either way, the effect feels purposeful and calming. In one corner of the chamber, a young acolyte grinds a mixture of herbs, petals, and resins using a small mortar. The aroma rises with each turn of the pestle, filling the room with a scent that is equal parts grounding and soothing. He gestures for you to approach. When you lean close, he lifts a pinch of the mixture to your wrist. The fragrance settles over your skin in a delicate wave. He explains, through simple hand motions, that priests apply this blend before sleep to ease the breath and steady the heartbeat. The scent lingers in the air, cool and earthy. You are guided into a second chamber where several priests are preparing their sleeping spaces. Instead of simple mats, they arrange raised wooden platforms lightly padded with woven reeds. Their bedding is sparse, thin sheets, a small headrest, and linen wraps lightly scented with resin smoke. The platforms are positioned to face an open courtyard. When the breeze flows through the corridor, it passes directly across the sleepers' bodies. One priest adjusts the angle of a cloth hung over the doorway, ensuring the air enters in a smooth, gentle current. A lesser-known insight from studies of religious households suggests that priests maintained stricter nighttime routines than ordinary families. They avoided heavy blankets, preferred thin garments, and often slept in airy rooms with minimal clutter so that airflow could pass freely. Watching them now, laying out their bedding with deliberate caution, you sense how disciplined their relationship with comfort must have been. In another corner, two priests sit beside a shallow stone basin half filled with water. They dip linen strips into the basin and place them across their forearms and necks. The water cools quickly in the night air, and the effect shows in their softened posture. One priest gently presses a damp strip to his forehead, then lays it across his sleeping platform. You notice that the linen is woven more finely than most others you have seen, shimmering faintly in the lamplight. According to some analyses of ritual textiles, certain linens used by priests were intended to retain moisture longer, prolonging the cooling relief. A quiet bell chimes somewhere deeper in the residence. The chanting subsides. Priests begin lowering their lamps one by one, dimming the glow until the halls fall into soft semi-darkness. You watch as a senior priest steps into an interior courtyard lit only by moonlight. He raises his hands gently and breathes in the cool night air with gratitude. His gesture feels as old as the stone beneath your feet. He beckons for you to follow. You join him at the center of the courtyard, where a small pond glimmers. The water mirrors the moon, shifting with minute ripples. He explains through slow motions that the pond cools the air at night, feeding soft freshness into the rooms surrounding it. When he invites you to dip your hands, you do so. The water is cool enough to make you pause. Droplets cling to your skin as you lift your hands back into the air. The breeze catches them instantly, cooling your fingers with a sudden shiver. Around the courtyard, priests settle onto their sleeping platforms. Their silhouettes move quietly, adjusting linens, smoothing reeds, and arranging small clay jars near their beds. Inside, the jars are mixtures of herbs meant to sharpen dreams or calm restless thoughts. Some literary fragments from antiquity mention that dreams were believed to hold messages from deities. Although not everyone agrees on how literally these beliefs shaped nightly habits, the use of scented herbs suggests a connection between spiritual clarity and restful sleep. You stand at the far side of the courtyard and watch as the last lamp is dimmed. A hush settles over the residence. The only sounds are the gentle gurgle of the pond and the wind bending through narrow corridors. The air feels cool, steady, and holy in a way you cannot quite name. A young acolyte approaches and places a feather fan into your hands. He motions for you to step into a small alcove. When you do, you feel the airflow strengthen, funneled by two stone walls that converge toward the opening. The acolyte nods, indicating that priests often pause here before sleep to allow the cool air to settle their minds. You close your eyes and raise your face to the breeze. The combination of the wind, the scent of herbs, and the quiet of the courtyard draws you into a deep sense of calm. When you open your eyes again, the acolyte has already returned to his duties. The priests lie peacefully in their beds, the night gently weaving around them. You take one last breath of the courtyard's coolness before stepping softly back into the lane. The air outside feels warmer, but you carry the stillness of the priestly chamber within you. You walk on, guided by moonlight and the subtle promise of more secrets waiting in the ancient night. You continue along the moonlit path, leaving the priestly residence with its quiet, fragrant stillness lingering in your breath. The air outside feels warmer, but your senses remain sharpened by the cool stone corridors you just left behind. As you walk, a low rumble rises from the distance. Not thunder, not footsteps, something steadier, rhythmic, like the deep drumming of many hooves against packed earth. Your pace quickens. Soon you reach an overlook where the land slopes outward toward a wide floodplain. The moon reveals a scene alive with movement. Dozens of workers are guiding cattle, donkeys, and goats toward low enclosures made of wooden posts and woven fencing. The animals move in clusters, snorting and huffing, their breaths visible in tiny clouds illuminated by lanterns. You have stumbled upon a nighttime herding operation, a chore shaped by temperature and survival. One long-standing observation shared by researchers studying rural Egyptian life is that shepherding often shifted to nighttime hours during the hottest months. Animals needed to conserve strength for the following day. Grazing in the cooler darkness protected them from exhaustion and helped families avoid heat stroke. As you step closer, you see how naturally the village flows around this rhythm. A young herder passes you, leading a pair of goats tethered with braided cords. He wipes sweat from his brow with a strip of cloth, though the night breeze already cools him. He lifts the goat's water skin so they can drink before entering the enclosure. Their tongues lap at the cool water eagerly. The young man nods at you, his expression calm and focused, then guides the animals inside. You move down a small slope toward a cluster of workers, spreading fresh sand across the ground. They smooth it with wooden rakes, creating a softer resting area for the livestock. The sand still holds warmth from the day, but beneath it lies cooler layers. When the workers lift handfuls of deeper sand, tiny wisps of cool air rise. One man motions for you to touch the newly spread surface. You kneel and press your palm against it. It feels surprisingly mild, not far from the cool stone floors of the cliffside home you visited earlier. You hear a gentle snort and glance to your left. A woman is brushing a donkey's coat using a coarse reed brush dipped in a basin of water. She runs the brush along the donkey's neck, down its flank, and across its hind legs. The wet bristles release a faint mist that evaporates almost instantly in the dry night air. The donkey relaxes visibly, lowering its head in appreciation. Some specialists who study ancient animal care suggest that this simple cooling method helped maintain the animal's strength for work the following morning. A small group of children stands near a fenced area, tossing bundles of dry grain leaves over the enclosure. They laugh as the animals nibble eagerly. The children occasionally run to a large clay jar positioned nearby. The jar sweats with moisture, indicating it is filled with cool water. One child dips her hands inside and splashes water over her face. She gasps at the chill and giggles. The jar is buried halfway into the earth, maintaining its coolness thanks to the surrounding soil. You notice an older man nearby adjusting a wooden windbreak. He positions it to redirect a passing breeze toward the animal's enclosure. The windbreak looks simple, a wooden panel woven with palm fibers. Yet when he moves it slightly, the wind shifts noticeably. The cool air reaches you a heartbeat later, brushing across your arms. The man catches your eye and gives a small nod, pleased that you felt the effect. Some rural traditions describe such portable wind guides, used both for livestock and for workers resting after dark. Another woman enters the enclosure carrying a shallow clay bowl of water. She pours a thin line of water into a narrow trench carved along the inside of the fence. The water seeps into the soil, cooling it enough for the animals to lie down without discomfort. This method appears occasionally in records of desert farming communities, though not universally. Standing here, watching the animals settle into the cooled patches of earth, it feels completely natural. A young herder approaches with a small pot of crushed herbs. He sprinkles a thin trail of them around the perimeter of the enclosure. The scent drifts upward, a mixture of sage and something sharper. He explains in quiet words that the herbs discourage insects from gathering around the livestock during the warm night. Though scholars still discuss how widespread such practices were, the idea feels intuitive. You follow a narrow track toward a larger enclosure where several cattle rest. Their heavy bodies rise and fall with slow breaths. A man sitting on a low stool runs a cloth soaked in water along one cow's back. The cow flicks its tail lazily and leans into the touch. The man smiles, murmuring something too soft to hear. The nighttime quiet gives space for these tender routines, small gestures that tie humans and animals together in shared relief from the heat. You glance toward a group of workers seated around a low fire pit. They are not warming themselves. Rather, they use the smoke to keep insects away from the herd. They add specific dried herbs to the small flame, releasing a pleasant scent that drifts through the camp. The workers talk quietly, exchanging stories about the day's labor, the river's mood, and the behavior of certain animals. Their tone is steady, relaxed. These moments seem as restorative for them as for the animals they tend. One young woman steps away from the group to check a donkey foal lying on a pile of cool sand. She adjusts a woven blanket beneath the foal, ensuring it doesn't trap heat. Then she places a damp cloth on the foal's neck. The animal sighs and closes its eyes. You notice how naturally she reads the animal's comfort, as though she has grown up doing this nightly. Moving on, you reach another enclosure, where sheep are huddled together, but not tightly. They arrange themselves instinctively to catch the breeze flowing between two low hills. A man standing nearby explains with gestures that sheep, like many animals, naturally choose sleeping arrangements that maximize airflow. Whether learned from observation or passed down through herding tradition, The families honoring these instincts show remarkable sensitivity. You take a moment to stand still. The breeze moves softly across the entire floodplain, washing over both humans and animals. The moonlight glimmers off the sand, off the water jars, off the coats of resting creatures. Everywhere you look, night cooling is not merely a human concern but a shared endeavor. Livestock and people alike depend on the night for recovery before the next harsh day begins. As you step back toward the village, you notice something else. A young girl kneels near a small trough and fills it with cool water. She touches her fingertips to the surface, then taps them onto her forehead. Her motions mirror those you saw in workers' courtyards, in priestly chambers, and in children's bedtime rituals. You realize that cooling in the night is not a segmented practice. It is woven into every corner of ancient life, linking all creatures together. The sounds of the herds fade behind you. The breeze continues its low hum, and you walk on, heading toward a quieter part of the village where another piece of Egypt's nighttime wisdom awaits. You continue down the path, letting the soft rumble of animals fade behind you until the night grows still once more. Ahead, the lanes narrow again, bending between tall mud brick walls that cast long, cool shadows across the ground. The village feels quieter than ever now. Most doors are closed, lamps dimmed, conversations replaced by gentle breathing from people already drifting into sleep. But then you hear it, a delicate scraping, a faint splash, a soft whisper of water moving where you least expect it. You follow the sound until you reach a small, recessed doorway. Someone has left it open just enough for the breeze to slip out. Cool air touches your face with a welcome caress. You step inside and discover a world entirely different from the sandy courtyards, breezy rooftops, and wide-open fields you've just crossed. It is a kitchen, a quiet, moonlit kitchen. The coolness surprises you so deeply that you pause in the doorway for several seconds, savoring it. Kitchens in ancient Egypt were not simply cooking spaces, they were cooling spaces. Their design, materials, and layout created small pockets of refuge from the heat of the day, and by nightfall, they often held onto the coolest temperatures in the entire house. A widely discussed point in domestic architecture is that many kitchens were built on the shaded side of the home, or partly sunken into the earth. Standing here, you can feel that design immediately. The floor beneath your feet is lower than the street outside, the walls thick, the ceiling supported by sturdy beams that trap the day's shadows. Clay jars line the walls, their cool surfaces glimmering faintly in the low lamplight. A young woman stands at a counter grinding barley with a stone mortar. She pauses to wipe her hands on her tunic, then gestures for you to enter. You do so quietly. The air smells faintly of baked bread, crushed herbs, and cool clay. The temperature dips noticeably as you reach the center of the room. The stone counter radiates a gentle chill, stored from hours of shade. You move toward a large pottery jar positioned in a shallow pit. Its surface glistens slightly. The woman lifts the lid and invites you to look inside. The jar holds water, not icy, not even cold, but distinctly cooler than the night air. Its temperature has been lowered naturally by evaporation through the porous clay. She dips a ladle into the jar and offers you a sip. The water tastes smooth, almost sweet. Your mouth relaxes instantly. A detail mentioned often in domestic studies is that kitchen storage jars were treasured not just for preserving food, but for cooling water without any mechanical means. In the corner of the room, a man kneels beside a clay oven shaped like an inverted bowl. Its surface is darkened with ash, but its interior is quiet now. The heat of the day has long since drained away. The man places his palm near the oven's mouth and nods in approval, satisfied that the temperature has finally dropped. He then places a bundle of vegetables inside to rest on the cooled floor of the oven. This method, used by many families, kept certain foods crisp through the night. The oven's thick walls acted like a natural insulation chamber, cooling from within when the fire was long gone. From another room, a grandmother enters carrying a basket of legumes. She sets it on a stone shelf embedded in the wall. You touch the shelf and feel a surprising coldness. She notices your reaction and laughs softly. She points upward, showing how the shelf sits where the breeze enters through a narrow slit. This vent, though small, channels airflow directly onto stored foods. Some specialists believe these vents were intentionally placed to prevent spoilage in hot months. Watching the grandmother arrange her ingredients here, you can see how effortlessly the system works. In a niche near the floor, you find a set of small clay bowls arranged in a line. Each bowl holds something different: lentils, salt, onions, crushed mint leaves. Their arrangement seems purposeful. When you kneel closer, you understand why. The niche is positioned below another small opening in the wall. A slow ribbon of air moves across the bowls, drying herbs, cooling vegetables, and keeping pests away. A lesser-known interpretation in some academic circles suggests that kitchen airflow doubled as a preservation method, allowing families to stretch their food supplies farther in warm seasons. A girl enters, carrying a piece of damp linen. She drapes it over a jar containing leftover bread. The cloth cools as the breeze touches it, keeping the bread soft and fresh for the next morning. She pats the cloth gently, then gestures for you to feel it. You do. The surface is cool, the jar beneath it cooler still. She beams proudly, as if showing off a treasured family trick. In the far corner, two boys sit cleaning a small pile of fish caught earlier in the evening. They work quickly, rinsing each fish with cool water drawn from the clay jar. When they finish, they place the cleaned fish on a broad ceramic tray and slide it into a low hollow cut into the wall. The hollow is lined with smooth stones, each one colder than the room around it. You touch one stone and feel the chill it has gathered from the shaded earth behind the wall. Some researchers note that these built-in cool niches were precursors to simple refrigeration methods, grounded in stone engineering and airflow rather than ice. Nearby, a woman kneels beside a raised basin filled with damp sand. She pushes a pottery vessel deep into the sand until only the lid remains visible. She explains through gestures that this keeps milk and fruit cool until morning. The sand acts like insulation. The moisture evaporates slowly, cooling the vessel. You have seen such cooling pits used for animals earlier, but here the method takes on a more refined domestic purpose. As you explore further, you notice a clay pipe running along the ceiling. It is not for carrying water, but for drawing hot air upward from the fire chamber of the oven when it is in use. Tonight, it is dormant, but its presence insists on clever design. Some scholars still puzzle over how sophisticated early ventilation systems truly were. The pipe here, combined with the cool stone and layered airflow, makes the kitchen feel like a carefully engineered sanctuary. The woman grinding barley signals for the others to gather. They begin placing ingredients into small jars, preparing them for the next day's cooking. But their movements remain unhurried, softened by the coolness of the room. A quiet harmony fills the space. The scrape of stone against grain, the gentle clack of bowls, the faint swoosh of passing air. A man lifts a handful of pulse flour and lets it fall slowly between his fingers. The grains catch the moonlight filtering through the vents. He seems to be testing its dryness, ensuring it will keep through the night. These sensory tests, touch, smell, weight, are far older than instruction tablets, but no less accurate. Before leaving, you pause near the doorway and watch the family continue their calm evening tasks. The kitchen, with its cool earth, porous jars, shaded walls, and gentle airflow, has become a haven. You understand why some families drift here before sleep, resting on mats placed near the cooler floor, allowing the night to settle into their bones. You step outside again, and the warmer night greets you gently. The coolness of the kitchen clings to your skin like a final blessing. You inhale deeply, ready to follow the next thread of the ancient night, now richer with the scent of grain, clay, and the faint memory of stone-born coolness. You leave the cool kitchen behind, stepping once more into the open night. The air feels warmer again, but now you recognize the heat for what it is, a companion, not an enemy. You have seen how every family, every priest, every traveler bends and shapes the desert's warmth into something livable. So when you notice a soft rustling ahead, mingled with slow footsteps and the quiet clatter of pottery, you follow it willingly, curious about who else might be awake at this late hour. You soon find yourself at the edge of another courtyard, this one deeper and more secluded than the others. A wooden ladder leans against the wall, leading up to a broad balcony lined with sleeping mats. A few dim lanterns hang from the railing, glowing like captured fireflies. You climb the ladder gently, guided by the flickering light. At the top, you discover a family of older villagers settling into their nightly routine. Several elders sit on low stools arranged in a wide semicircle. They speak softly to one another as they prepare for sleep. Their voices carry the weight of long experience, each tone slow and deliberate. A widely recognized insight among researchers who study aging in ancient Egypt is that older adults often held their own unique cooling rituals habits, sharpened by decades of living with the desert's extremes. Watching them now, you sense a peaceful mastery in every gesture. One man sits polishing a small wooden headrest, running a damp cloth along its curved surface. When he finishes, he sets it beside his mat and rests his hand on it, as though greeting an old friend. Headrests like this, carved with gentle arches, kept the neck lifted and the air flowing freely beneath the skull through the long, warm nights. He taps the wood lightly, pointing to the open space beneath. You nod in understanding. Elevation, airflow, and familiar comfort, all in one simple object. Beside him, a woman slowly unfurls a thin linen sheet. She pauses after each movement, allowing the breeze to pass through the fabric before lowering it further. The sheet ripples, capturing the night air. She smiles as she lets it settle onto her mat. Some scholars note that older Egyptians preferred lighter linens than the young, valuing fabrics that did not cling to the skin. Watching her smooth out the folds, you can see why. Even the slightest pocket of trapped air seems unwelcome. At the far side of the balcony, an elderly couple stands near a waist-high wall. They are placing a series of small, water-filled bowls along the ledge. When the breeze flows across them, droplets evaporate slowly, cooling the surrounding space just enough to create a microclimate around their sleeping area. This simple method appears in several depictions of household scenes, a delicate partnership between water and air, repeated across generations without need for explanation. A younger family member, perhaps a grandchild, brings out a basket filled with smooth stones. She pours a little water into a clay dish and sets several stones inside. The stones absorb the moisture and release a faint coolness as the wind brushes them. She positions the dish strategically near her grandparents' sleeping mats. Some observers of ancient aging practices mention that elders often preferred cooling systems that could be refreshed easily and required little effort. This little dish seems to be exactly that. A gentle cough draws your eye. Another grandmother is sitting near a railing, tracing her fingers along a jar of scented oil. She opens the jar and dips a fingertip inside. The aroma that reaches you is soft and restoring, part lotus, part lemony herb, part something earth-like that you cannot identify. She rubs the oil along her wrists and temples. The fragrance mingles with the moving air, creating a sense of calm. A lesser-known commentary from a few ancient sources suggests that scented oils used by elders served both for comfort and for cooling. Certain scents helped slow the breath, easing the body's response to heat. You watch her close the jar with careful hands. She then wraps a dampened cloth around it, preserving its coolness for the next night. These small, thoughtful habits weave together to form a gentle, nightly ritual, far different from the more energetic routines of younger families. A man seated nearby smooths a mat woven from palm fibers. He positions it carefully so that the breeze will strike it first before touching his skin. He tests the airflow by waving his hand lightly above the mat. When he finds the perfect angle, he settles down and sighs deeply. Some specialists in ancient climate habits suggest that elders often chose sleep locations based on years of learning where breezes gathered most reliably. Watching this man, you see the wisdom written into his motions. The conversation around you softens as more elders prepare to lie down. A woman ties a small pouch of dried mint leaves to the wooden post beside her mat. She presses it gently, releasing a faint fragrance. This small ritual, according to certain ethnographic parallels, may have been used to steady breathing or ease the warm tickle of nighttime air. The scent reaches you like a cool whisper. Another elder kneels near a clay pot buried partially in the floor. He removes the lid and inhales the faint coolness rising from within. Inside the pot are a few pieces of fruit resting on a layer of damp sand. He selects one piece, sets it aside, then covers the pot again. He gestures toward it with pride, explaining how the earth beneath the balcony holds onto the night's coolness longer than the open air. You imagine how many times he has described this trick to younger listeners, proud of knowledge shaped by memory. You wander across the balcony to an alcove draped in loosely woven cloth. Inside, an elderly woman sits cross-legged, sipping a warm drink from a clay cup. She waves you closer. When you smell the drink, you detect hints of chamomile and a subtle tang of a dried desert flower. She explains that drinking warm, herbal infusions before bed helps align the body with the night, rather than resist it. Several experts examining ancient medicinal practices mention similar techniques. A warm drink can calm the nerves and ease the mind into a restful state, even in the heat. She hands you a cup. You take a small sip. The drink warms your chest, but paradoxically, you feel your body relax, making room for the breeze to work more effectively. You thank her quietly and return the cup. The balcony begins to settle into silence. A few more lanterns are extinguished. Shadows stretch across the mats. The breeze strengthens just a little, brushing against the linen sheets like soft fingers. Elders lie down slowly, their movements deliberate but relaxed. Each one adjusts their linens, headrests, or cooling bowls until everything feels just right. Then a sound rises, soft, low humming. One of the elders begins singing what might be a lullaby or perhaps an old prayer. His voice carries through the balcony like a slow, drifting wave. Another elder joins in, then a third. Their harmonies blend with the night wind. It is a melody seasoned by time, worn smooth by ritual, meant not to entertain but to ease the spirit. You feel the soothing vibration settle into your chest. The humming eventually fades, replaced by the steady rhythm of calm breathing. A few elders close their eyes. One stares at the stars with a small smile. Another shifts slightly to rest a hand against a cool stone jar beside her. The scene is peaceful, almost timeless. You step away quietly, leaving the balcony filled with soft silhouettes. As you descend the ladder, the coolness clings to you like a gentle farewell. The elders' simple, refined rituals linger in your mind. They have shown you another face of the desert night, a version shaped by patience, adaptation, and the serene acceptance of warmth. You return to the lane below, ready for the night to offer yet another lesson from the ancient world. You leave the elders' balcony behind and follow a narrow alley that curves toward the outskirts of the village. The air shifts again the moment you step out from between the tall walls. It feels lighter, more open, as if the night itself has inhaled deeply and stretched its limbs out toward the horizon. The desert waits ahead, dark and wide, but instead of pulling you outward, something draws your attention downward. A faint glow flickers near the ground, a small, steady flame. You follow it. Soon you approach a cluster of objects arranged carefully on a broad, flat platform of packed earth. The shape of the platform is smooth and circular, ringed with stones that catch the moonlight. At first glance, you think it might be an outdoor workspace, but as you draw closer, you begin to see the real purpose behind the arrangement. Clay molds, drying racks, carved stamps, and beside them, long strips of linen laid out neatly in rows. You have found a night workshop dedicated to shaping the very items that help villagers sleep better. The pillows, mats, fans, jars, cloths, and cooling tools you have seen across the village. A woman sits cross-legged at the center of the platform, carving a small wooden block with a short, sharp knife. She moves with care, turning the wood slowly as she adds delicate grooves. When she looks up, she greets you with a calm nod. Her eyes sparkle with the kind of alertness that belongs to people who prefer working under moonlight instead of sunlight. Many artisans in ancient Egypt favored nighttime hours for certain tasks. The cooler air helped their hands stay steady, and the gentle light from oil lamps allowed them to focus without the harsh glare of the sun. She gestures for you to come closer. When you kneel beside her, she places the half-carved wooden block into your hands. It is a decorative panel meant to be sewn onto the edge of a linen canopy used for rooftop sleeping. The grooves she has cut will guide airflow as it slips through the cloth. You run your thumb along the channels and feel how smoothly they are carved. One widely acknowledged insight from craft studies is that skilled woodworkers used airflow guiding shapes long before they could explain the physics behind them. They simply learned from wind, cloth, and experience. Across the platform, a young man kneads clay with both hands. He presses it firmly, rolling it into long strips before flattening them across a wooden board. The clay is destined to become the next batch of porous jars used to cool water through evaporation. He lifts a strip to show you its thickness, flattening the edges to make them smooth. When he molds it into a cylinder, he leaves tiny gaps in the clay walls. These gaps will allow water to seep through in the slightest measure. A few specialists still discuss whether the ancient potters deliberately tuned the porosity of their jars or whether the effect came naturally from the clay they used. Watching the young man's careful shaping, you sense intention in every movement. A girl sits beside a stack of dried reeds, sorting them by length and thickness. She lifts the longer reeds and places them in a basket meant for crafting mats. The shorter pieces she keeps aside for weaving perfume fans. She hums softly as she works, pausing now and then to run her fingers across a reed's surface. She seems to understand each piece as though it carries its own story. A lesser-known observation from certain ethnographic parallels suggests that families often passed down reed, selecting techniques through casual gestures and lullabies. The girl's humming feels like part of that legacy. tying labor and music into one endless thread. Near her, two women dye linens using crushed pigments mixed with water. They dip strips of linen into basins and lift them carefully, letting the excess paint drip back into the bowl. The linens glow faintly in the moonlight, their colors muted but vivid. These cloths are not merely decorative. Their light coloring helps reflect daytime sunlight when used as rooftop canopies. One scholar examining early textiles once speculated that dye patterns may have been chosen partly to encourage airflow perception. The idea remains debated, yet looking at the soft flutter of these linens, you can imagine how designs influence both mood and movement of air. On another side of the workshop, a man uses a smooth stone to polish the surface of a clay mold. He lifts the mold to the light and inspects it closely. This mold will shape the headrest supports used by families throughout the village. He rubs the stone slowly, making the surface slick and cool. When he presses his palm against it, he nods with satisfaction. He then hands it to a younger apprentice, who carries it to a row of completed molds. The apprentice moves with quiet pride, careful not to disturb any of the drying pieces. A faint scraping sound draws your attention to a corner where an elderly artisan kneels beside a tray of tiny clay beads. She rolls each bead between her fingers before stringing them onto threads of palm fiber. These strands will be sewn into sleeping mats to create a raised texture that keeps bodies slightly lifted above the heat trapped in the fibers. You watch her press a bead into place. Her fingers are steady despite their age. The beads clack gently as she sets them down. Some archaeological finds show similar threaded mats that scholars believe were designed for comfort and cooling, though the exact function of the beads is still a topic of discussion. Seeing the craft performed in front of you makes the answer feel obvious. They lift the sleeper into a gentle cradle of airflow. You turn to see a young boy carrying a handful of small clay bells. He shakes one lightly. It produces a soft, soothing ring. He sets it beside a group of others, arranging them in a pattern along a linen curtain. When the breeze catches the curtain, the bells will emit faint tones. He gestures toward the curtain, showing how the sound signals airflow to the sleeper. Such gentle auditory cues likely helped families sense shifts in wind direction during hot nights. Though rarely mentioned in formal studies, these little bells reveal a subtle dialogue between sound and comfort. Another artisan sits near a shallow pit filled with cool sand. She shapes small clay containers designed to be partially buried in such pits. The containers will hold herbs, perfumes, or oils. She places one finished container into the sand and shows how it fits snugly, staying cool through the night. She then dips her hand into the sand and lifts a small handful to show how the temperature changes with depth. This instinctive knowledge of the desert's layers guided countless household routines. As you continue wandering through the workshop, you notice a group of youths weaving palm fronds into large circular fans. They work quickly, weaving and tightening the strips. Some fans are plain, others decorated with painted edges. These will be used throughout the village, from elite households to humble rooftops. When one of the youths finishes a fan, he tests it by waving it toward a lantern. The flame bends sharply. He laughs and nods, satisfied with its strength. You sit on a low stool near the center of the platform and take in the entire scene. Every direction reveals a cooling tool in some stage of creation. Every artisan works with calm intention. Every gesture carries traces of long experience. The night sky above feels like a canopy of its own, sheltering their efforts. The breeze passes through the workshop, stirring cloth, cooling wet clay, and carrying the scent of wood shavings, pigments, herbs, and river dust. One master artisan steps forward, holding a carved wooden object. He hands it to you. It is a stylized stamp, carved with the pattern of a lotus flower. He gestures toward a strip of linen and presses the stamp gently into the cloth. The lotus pattern appears in soft indigo. He explains through quiet gestures that stamped linens were sometimes laid over sleeping mats to mark them as gifts or to encourage pleasant dreams. The lotus, symbol of rebirth and calm, was a perfect motif for nighttime rest. A few artisans gather near a brazier to warm their hands after working with cool clay. They speak softly about airflow, about the strength of certain reeds, about which sandpits stay cool longest. Each comment carries the quiet confidence of people who have lived their whole lives shaping the tools of comfort. As the hour grows late, one artisan extinguishes the brazier flame. Another gathers finished pieces into baskets, stacking them gently. The breeze continues to pass through the workshop like a silent partner. When you leave, the platform glows behind you under the moon, full of half-finished fans, fresh clay jars, soft linens, and carved wood. These tools will cool the village tomorrow night, and the night after, and the night after that. The workshop is not just a place of labor, it is a heartbeat of nightly comfort. You walk on, knowing that the next part of the ancient night holds one final lesson before the story draws to its gentle close. You leave the night workshop and wander toward the last quiet stretch of the village, where only a few lanterns glow and most homes float in near darkness. The heat has eased into something soft and familiar, almost like a warm blanket laid lightly across the desert. Your footsteps slow without meaning to. You are drifting toward the final moments of the night, when Egypt feels both ancient and freshly alive, held within the breath of the cooling wind. As you follow a narrow lane, you notice a familiar scent rising in the air. Not incense, not herbs, not the smoke of cooking fires. This is something gentler, almost sweet. You turn the corner and find a small shrine built into the side of a mud brick home. A single flame flickers inside, steady and still. Offerings sit neatly arranged around it: bread, lotus petals, cooled water in small bowls. This is a household shrine dedicated to the gods who guard the night and protect sleepers. A commonly observed feature of ancient domestic life is that many homes maintained shrines like this, spaces where families could make small devotions before drifting into sleep. It wasn't merely ritual, it created a sense of emotional coolness, a state of grounded calm that mattered as much as air and water. Standing here, the flame soft against the stone walls, you feel that comfort deeply. A woman kneels before the shrine, placing a fresh lotus petal beside a bowl of scented water. She closes her eyes for a moment, whispers a quiet prayer, then dips her fingertips into the water and touches her forehead. When she rises, she notices you and offers a peaceful smile. She motions for you to approach. When you lean close, she gestures to the bowls arranged there and explains through small movements that these offerings are meant not only to honor protective spirits, but also to cool the home physically through the water's evaporation, emotionally through the calm it brings. A child appears beside her, rubbing sleepy eyes. He carries a small clay figure shaped like a protective deity. The mother places the figure carefully on a ledge near the lotus petals. The child looks relieved, almost comforted by the act. The presence of familiar symbols, according to several interpretations of ancient household practice, gave children and adults alike a sense of safety that softened the night's heat. You walk farther along the lane, following a faint glow ahead. You arrive at another small domestic shrine set against a courtyard wall. This one displays an arrangement of pottery jars, filled with cool sand and herbs. A young man kneels beside it, sprinkling sweet-smelling water onto the sand. As he does, the scent rises and the air around the shrine freshens. He holds his hands above the jars and breathes deeply, allowing the scent and the coolness to settle his thoughts. Some researchers have noted that these shrines often held household remedies, cooling tools, and fragrant mixtures associated with healing and rest. Here, the connection becomes clear. You continue walking, and soon the lane opens onto a wide rooftop shared by several families. You climb a short ladder and emerge into a space bathed in moonlight. The rooftop is dotted with small shrines, each one glowing softly. Families have arranged their beds near these shrines, trusting the presence of their household gods to protect their dreams. A soft breeze drifts across the open space, making the lantern flames tremble in slow rhythm. One man sits near the edge of the roof, dipping a brush into a bowl of scented water. He paints small symbols onto the stone railing, simple strokes forming shapes associated with protection or peace. When he finishes, he lifts the bowl to the breeze, allowing droplets to evaporate and cool the air around him. The scent follows in delicate waves. Some scholars still discuss how symbolic markings, cooling rituals, and spiritual gestures may have blended into one unified practice. Watching him work, it seems like the most natural thing in the world. Nearby, an elderly woman sits cross-legged before her household shrine. She hums a low tune while sprinkling herbs onto a small clay dish. The herbs release a faint aroma as they heat slightly under the lantern. She closes her eyes and lets the scent drift into the night. The tune she sings feels older than language, a rhythm that has echoed across rooftops for countless generations. You feel yourself swaying unconsciously to its gentle cadence. A family lies on their mats, heads resting on carved wooden supports. One child gazes at a tiny amulet hanging from the shrine beside them. The amulet swings lightly in the breeze. The child reaches out to touch it before closing their eyes. These little tokens, simple charms, favored stones, carved symbols, appear again and again in discovered household objects. They serve not only as spiritual tools but as anchors of comfort, easing the mind's restlessness in warm nights. You wander to another corner of the roof where a young woman lights a small lamp before sleeping. She places the lamp inside a shallow clay bowl filled with cool water. The reflected light dances across the water's surface, casting waves of moving brightness on the walls. She inhales softly, letting the shimmering effect lull her into calm. This practice, though not heavily documented, is described in some artistic depictions, hinting at a tradition of letting water and flame blend to soothe the senses. As the rooftop settles into quiet, you hear a series of soft clicks. A man is adjusting a set of tiny clay chimes hanging near the shrine. When the wind passes through them, they produce a faint, soothing music. He tilts them slightly so the breeze catches the chimes more directly. Their whispering tone mixes with the distant murmur of the Nile and the slow, steady breathing of families drifting into sleep. The combination feels like a lullaby for the entire village. You sit for a moment on a cool stone ledge and absorb the atmosphere. The shrines glow, the breeze moves, the families breathe together in unity with the desert. Every shrine holds an echo of the same intention: calm the mind, ease the heart, guide the body into rest. Cooling and comfort have always been physical needs, but here they blend with something deeper, an emotional and spiritual serenity that shapes the way people surrender to sleep. A final breeze sweeps across the rooftop, carrying the scent of lotus, cooled water, clay, and faint incense. You close your eyes, letting it wash over you. This is the culmination of everything you've seen tonight: rooftops that breathe, kitchens that cool, priests who quiet the air with ritual, artisans who craft comfort with their hands, villagers who trust the night to cradle them gently. You rise slowly, feeling the story settle like dust into your bones. The people of this ancient world sleep now, wrapped in simple linens, soothed by wind, cooled by the wisdom of countless generations. And the desert, still vast and fierce by day, becomes their ally by night. The lanterns dim, the village exhales, and you drift onward into the soft final breath of the story. The village grows distant behind you as you take a few slow steps into the open night, letting the last traces of lamplight fade into darkness. The sand under your feet feels warm but gentle now, like a memory softening as it drifts away. The breeze continues its steady wandering, no longer carrying the weight of stories, only the quiet hush of the sleeping desert. Each breath you take feels longer, smoother, as though time itself has slowed down to match your pace. The sky stretches wide above, a calm, endless canvas of silver stars that glimmer softly without demanding your attention. They seem to watch over you with a patient, ancient stillness. The rhythm of the night settles around you. The air presses lightly against your skin, neither warm nor cool, simply present. The faint scents of herbs, clay, and distant river water linger like a whisper, fading gradually with every step you take. You feel your shoulders relax, your thoughts quieten, your body grow heavier in the most comfortable way. The desert seems to breathe with you now. Each inhale draws in the calm of the night. Each exhale releases whatever the day has left behind. You feel a softness blooming inside you, like the night itself has opened a place where you can finally rest. As you listen, the silence becomes a lullaby, a gentle hum, a steady pulse that guides you toward the edge of sleep. Let the cool imaginations of ancient Egypt linger for just a moment longer. Let the breeze settle across your thoughts, smoothing everything into stillness. You are safe. You are carried. You are already drifting. Let the night hold you. Let your breath slow down. Let sleep rise softly like a tide.